Good morning, everyone. Good morning. How was everybody's evening? Fantastic. Our recess time, guess what, has expired. So I will now call this meeting of the DNC Rules and Bylaws Committee back to order. Before we begin today, please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Jim?
Okay, thank you, Mignon. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is to call the roll. As a reminder, I do want to note for the record that this meeting is open to the public and will be live streamed today. Please be sure to state your name and your state before speaking for those listening remotely and for our court reporter. We are glad to once again be joined by Helen McFadden, our parliamentarian. Helen, will you call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Alex?
Present.
Ms. Andrews?
Present.
Mr. Applebaum?
I'm here.
Ms. Blanco? Present. Ms. Brazil? Here. Ms. Brown? Mr. Buckley?
Here.
Ms. Campagna-Wheaton? Here. Ms. Cardona has given her proxy to Ms. Kmark. She's expected to come later. Mr. Carnahan has given his proxy to Mr. Ray. Ms. Conrad has given her proxy to Mr. McDonald. Ms. Daughtry?
She's here. She's upstairs.
Mr. Davila Perez?
Present.
Ms. Davis? Mr. Devermont has given his proxy to Mr. Shea. Ms. Dingle? Ms. Dowdell?
Present.
Ms. Dugarala?
Present.
Mr. Eldridge? Ms. Fowler? Here. Ms. Free has given her proxy to Ms. Fowler. Mr. Goodman? Here. Ms. Hernandez has given her proxy to Mr. Buckley. Mr. Hicks has given his proxy to Mr. Marib. Mr. Wynn. Here. Ms. Kmark. Here. Mr. Capp. Here. Mr. Kerrigan has given his proxy to Ms. Dowdell. Ms. Klebe has given her proxy to Mr. Eldridge. Mr. Leon. Here. Ms. Lewis. Here. Ms. Lopez-Franson. I'm sorry. She has given her proxy to Mr. Capp. Mr. McDonald?
Here.
Ms. Monroe Moreno? Okay. Mr. Munez? Mr. Marib?
Here.
Mr. Ray?
Here.
Mr. Seltzer?
Here.
Mr. Shea? Ms. Spain has given her proxy to Ms. Dugarala. Mr. Spate?
Here.
Ms. Schwecker? Here. Mr. Thompson has given his proxy to Ms. Daughtry. Mr. Schreiber?
Present.
Mr. Unamoto? Here. Ms. Verrett? Mr. Washington?
Here.
You certainly have a quorum of more than 20.
Thank you, Helen. Members, according to our charter and bylaws, the quorum is 40% or 20 members in person or by proxy, and as Helen has reported, we definitely have a quorum. And I'll turn it over to my co-chair to kick us off here.
Thank you, Jim. As we get into our business today, I'd like us to discuss the process moving forward ahead of the August DNC meeting. Our work began in October when this committee adopted the resolution on principles and procedures for review of the 2028 Democratic Party presidential nominating calendar and request for a proposal to hold pre-window nominating contests. So far, the Rules and Bylaws Committee has reviewed 12 state party applications. After considering their written applications, we hosted each of these state parties, who spent countless hours demonstrating how they reflect the specified qualifications, also showing Democrats just how strong and diverse our party is across the country. To refresh everyone watching online, the 12 states for consideration are as follows: Delaware, New Hampshire, Illinois, Iowa, Michigan, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, Nevada, and New Mexico. Our commitment has always been to conduct a fair and transparent process, resulting in a calendar that produces the strongest general election candidate for the Democratic Party. This isn't a responsibility we take lightly. To that end, our deliberation of the early window, the delegate selection rules, and the call for the 2028 Democratic National Convention will continue over the coming weeks and months. The Rules and Bylaws Committee will gather in person on June 25th and June 26th. The committee will meet again in person on July 23rd and 24th. My co-chair and I also anticipate another virtual meeting of the committee. Staff of the Office of the Secretary and Party Affairs will work to confirm a date for this gathering of the body. Thank you.
Thank you, Mignon. Our next item of business is to continue discussion of the proposed 2028 delegate selection rules. With that in mind, today we are hoping to complete our review of Rules 10 through 14. During our virtual meeting earlier this month, the committee continued its review of the proposed rules. During the meeting, the committee reviewed Rule 5, covering non-discrimination. Rule 5 was adopted without amendment. The committee also reviewed Rule 6, covering affirmative action. Rule 6A and 6B were adopted without amendment. Rule 6C was amended to clarify how non-binary delegates will be counted for gender balance purposes. 6C was also amended to clarify that the state party chair completes the certification of the states at large delegates and alternates. Rule 6D through Rule 6I were also adopted without amendment. Rule 7, covering outreach and inclusion programs, was also reviewed. Rule 7 was amended to remove the line, quote, "as is already the practice in most states," end quote, in order to eliminate possible confusion. Rule 8, covering National Convention delegate apportionment, was also reviewed and was adopted without amendment. Rule 9, covering automatic party leaders and elected official delegates, was also reviewed and adopted without amendment. Last meeting, we also began our review of Rule 10, covering party leaders, pledged party leaders, and elected official delegates. Rule 10A was amended to include elected officials from federally recognized tribal nations in consideration for pledged party leaders and elected official delegates. Since we did not complete our review of Rule 10, we will begin picking back up with our review of that rule. Would staff please begin presenting the proposed 2028 delegate selection rules?
Moving on to Rule 10, as a refresher, before we begin our discussion, we will provide a brief overview of Rule 10. Will you deliver an overview of Rule 10, please?
Thank you, Co-Chair. Rule 10 is on pledged party leaders and elected official delegates. It sets priority order for selecting pledged party leaders and elected officials, requires PLEOs to be allocated proportionally like at-large delegates, limits who may select PLEOs, and under what governance conditions.
Thank you, Will. Members, the floor is open for discussion and amendments as we review the rule in chronological order. We will now begin our discussion of Rule 10, starting with Rule 10A. Do members have any additional proposed amendments to Rule 10A? Ooh, I can't see. Oh, Andre T.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe where our discussion had left off, we were in the middle of discussing the prioritization that happens in A1 right after we had added elected officials from tribes. My question, I have a question then that stems from this. So is this list right here the ordering of the prioritization, or is there other guidance that gives the prioritization? I know that in my state, when we are doing our PLEOs, we follow the prioritization exactly as is. And so if this is the case, if this is the list and there's not going to be it spelled out anywhere else, I would like for us to amend this list. But if this is not where the formal finalized prioritization comes from, I'm happy to move the discussion to that point at that time.
I mean, this is the list that we've discussed. Did you have some clarifications that you?
Then in that case, yes, I would like to amend this list in such a way that, in my opinion, the way it was written before kind of prioritized by population the number of constituents that these elected officials held. For instance, by starting with big city mayors, that's 250,000 or more statewide elected officials and so on. So I guess then my question would be, is it possible to get information about the number of constituents that these elected leaders from tribal nations would represent? Because I would then like to make sure they're appropriately within the ranking in terms of population they represent.
So you're asking if we can get numbers?
Yes, and maybe and so maybe the appropriate motions to bring this back at a future time, but I would just want to make sure that they are just appropriately represented within the rules based on the number of folks they represent. For instance, do those tribes have more people than a legislative district? Do they have fewer than a major city? That kind of thing, just making sure they're given their proper due.
Andre, my recollection from the last meeting was the member from Oklahoma said that the tribal nation size varies from anywhere from a few hundred to a few 100,000.
Do you have a specific amendment that you want to offer?
I will need to think on that, but I see other people have their hands raised, so I'm happy to yield to them and let the discussion continue.
Wendy?
Thank you. This is Wendy Davis from Georgia. So circling back to the previous conversation we had about this, it seems to me that some states are taking this as 3 different buckets, if you'll allow the analogy, and that if they have enough people who have applied in bucket 1, people who would be in bucket 2 or 3 are not considered. And that's how they have interpreted prioritized. In Georgia, we have just said all of these categories are people who are free to apply for a PLEO, and from that, all 3 buckets together, our members have picked from all of those. And I just think if we really mean a big city mayor should be picked and a 30-year member of your state executive committee should not be in the pool yet, it hasn't been clear to us in Georgia that that's what we meant. And if that's what we mean, I think we maybe need to have A, B, and C and make it clear that you don't get to B and C if A takes up everything. But I personally think that allowing all of these levels of people who have shown a dedication to the party to be in this PLEO and have one bucket instead of 3 buckets is what I would prefer, but I just wanted to make sure if we've got the rule, and the rule is that it's supposed to be 1, 2, 3, then we need to be explicit about that. But if that's not what we mean, then let's take it out.
Okay. Alicia?
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Alicia Andrews from Oklahoma. I wanted to circle back on the tribal leaders conversation. I don't purport to speak for tribal nations except to say that tribal nations are considered sovereign governments. And so even if a tribe has, less than 300,000, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are tantamount to a city council because they are a sovereign government. And I will circle back and talk to folks from the Native community to make sure that we're talking about this in the right way, because I don't think it's about numbers. But I just wanted to put that out there for consideration.
Okay. Yvette?
Thank you, Yvette Lewis, Maryland. Why don't we just take out the word priority? I mean, and then that way every state can determine, prioritize. Why can't we just say categories? Knowing that those are the categories that we're talking about. Because I think if we start arranging priorities according to, my state in Maryland would be completely different than your state, what is considered a priority. But if we make it that these are the categories that can be considered, that would seem to make more sense to me. And then we're not going through each individual state trying to pick and choose what's first, what's second, and what's third. We just know that these people would be included.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Second.
Okay.
Is there any objection?
Like that one.
Sorry, without objection, the amendment is included. Okay, Yvette? Oh, we got Yvette. Elaine?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Busy.
y'all
We're
missed
busy
it?
doing a little research here. What did you just do?
Well, I was just going to say, we'll just have them go back.
Basically,
Why don't you go back and we'll have them go back.
Okay, so we've
Just a
taken
word.
out priority.
That's all.
Okay, that's very good, because in fact, we're looking up some stuff, and the average the average of the largest American cities is 992,000, and the largest tribe is Navajo with 425,000, and it goes down from there. So if you'd wanted to leave in priority, I think we've got the priority right, but I think there's different politics in different places, and we might as well just take out the term priority.
The problem with using priority that I think has been highlighted here is that, as Yvette points out, different states use different categories for their municipalities and subdivisions and so on. For example, in our state, we abolished half the counties, but only half of them, and so on. How do you sort that out? Much better to leave that to the state to figure out.
Mm-hmm. Elaine, did you have further?
Yeah, no, I just was doing this, and then in the meantime, you fixed it.
Okay.
Or Yvette fixed it.
Okay. David?
Thank you, David McDonald, Washington. First, if we are taking out the word priority, I think we probably also need to take out the semicolon that was in there, separating the executive branch and the legislative branch, because otherwise it's going to be confusing as to why there are two categories. But on the bigger point, when I first encountered this rule before I was on the RBC, but at least in my state, it was interpreted as Wendy is talking about, that even if you were a precinct committee officer, as long as you were elected by voters to represent them somewhere in the Democratic Party, you were eligible to be elected in this category. You might have trouble getting votes sufficient to win the election, but you were given the privilege of, in recognition of your service to the party, of being eligible to be considered. And I think that was a good thing to do when you're trying to recruit volunteers. And it also gave our state party, and I think other state chairs, the flexibility to work with the various interest groups to say what politically works to put this delegation together. Who has been elected already? Who can get elected in the city? When I was a county chair of the largest county in Washington, and geographically larger than many states, and one of the largest counties in the country, I was told, sorry, you cannot make the at-large list because you can get elected in your county. And that was the proper thing to do, to save space for people who couldn't get elected in their county, who might have been volunteering in the state office for 30 or 40 years, never seen a convention or whatever, could not necessarily get elected with campaign approvals and everything down with the other volunteers, but to make the system work, to give chairs that flexibility. And then at some point we put in this priority, which, as it read before the taking out of the word priority, would mean, for example, in my state, that the mayor of Spokane would get elected and the majority leader in the state Senate would be told, sorry, you're in the second bucket and there's no space for you. It's something that would be politically difficult at best. So I think we should get rid of the concept of priority, go with what Wendy is suggesting. If you are an elected official of one of our recognized entities, state government, tribal government, federal government, or in the party structure itself, that you're eligible to be considered. You're not necessarily going to get elected, but you're eligible to be considered in this category and at least given the recognition of your service to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Indira?
Thank you. This is Indira de Gurala from Colorado. As it reads right now, elected officials from executive branches of federally recognized tribal nations. So tribal nations span multiple states. And so would it be better to state if they have residents in any given state? And that state should be, they should be considered in that state versus a different state? Like if a tribal nation spans 4 different states and the elected official lives in one state of that tribal nation within those borders, should they be given allocation in that state where they are recognized by the state boundary? Because I think it leads to some confusion as to which
So
state
if we're
they
talking about
belong to.
delegates, a delegate can only represent a state, so.
They have to be registered in the state.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you have to be registered in that state.
You have to reside in that state?
Yeah.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right, that's the clarity I was seeking, thank
Yeah.
you.
Gary?
Building on what David said, Gary Shea, California, past chair of the LA County Democratic Party. I just want to point out that LA County is at the end of the list, and it has it'd be the 7th largest state if it by population. And so I also agree with changing it to categories as opposed to prioritization. Thank you.
Thank you. Frank?
Yeah, Frank Leon, DC. I think I've become convinced that it makes sense to get rid of the priority language. It's been in there for quite some time, but I think having a broader opportunity for people and then, letting them run and then letting the candidates, frankly, in my experience, put the slates together is typically what happens in states that I'm familiar with. So I think it makes sense. I'd ask about another clause that's in here where it says that elected officials from the executive branches of federally recognized tribal nations to be given equal consideration. And that seems to be, again, sort of setting a priority that you have the first bucket that's to be given equal consideration. And so if we're taking out priority, we might want to take out the to be given equal consideration language. And then I was looking up the regulations, which provide a little clarity about what's a big city, but when we come to the regulations, I think we can probably just eliminate that because we're getting rid of the priorities and allowing more flexibility. So I'd move that we delete to be given equal consideration as well, so there's just a line of potential.
Okay.
Can you get rid of my semicolon for me, too?
Did everybody understand what Frank said so that we don't have to?
Yeah.
So if we're voting on
He's doing me a solid, get rid of the semicolon, so.
Pardon me?
He's
And
getting rid of the semicolon in to do me a solid, so.
So Frank, you're suggesting that to get rid of equal consideration though, right? Is that your motion or?
To be given equal consideration.
Okay.
Frank, is that right on the screen?
Hey,
Is that correct on the screen?
Should we get rid of that "and" as well, but the first "and" that says officials and elected officials, if we're just doing a listing now? You know what I'm talking about? Line 22, yeah.
Okay, so an amendment has been offered. Is there any objection to this? Seeing none, we'll include the amendment. So we can move on to any more on 10A. Okay, we can move on to 10B. David?
I raised during our virtual meeting the same issue I'm about to raise in connection with 10B, but I raised it in connection with 8B, where the same language is used. And I'm referring to the language, and I think it's 10B1, where it says, on the basis of population and/or some measure of democratic strength. The reason I'm raising it again is that the discussion in the virtual meeting was hard to get back onto the track of what I was actually first asking about, and we never got back to it. So let me first clarify the question and then talk about the second point. Is it our intention, both in Rule 8B and 10B, where the language is the same, to say if you want to select delegates to your state convention or to your state committee based solely on population, one person, one vote, that's okay, which I think does make sense with respect to state committees. It may or may not make sense with respect to state conventions. Or alternatively, if you want to select to these bodies based solely on any measure of democratic strength without regard to population, without regard to what the measure is that okay? Can you do it based on members in your LPO? Can you do it based on contributors per zip code? Can you, on any basis? And I want answers to the two questions separately, because I need to clarify in my state that it's okay to select people for the state, to allocate delegates to a state convention solely on the basis of population, if that's what we're saying. If that issue has come up and was controversial in my state. And then as long as we're looking at it, I think we should clarify that we actually mean some form of electoral strength, not just the vaguest of, they got a good poll result in that district. But in that latter question, I'm not really interested in re-arguing something that the committee has already decided unless somebody else wants to do it. But I am interested in getting an answer to be clear on the record that it is okay to allocate delegates to a state convention solely on population without regard to the democratic strength in the jurisdiction sending delegates.
So, David, do you have a specific amendment or?
As to the first question, no, I just need the chairs to confirm what the intent is on the record and make sure that it exists. As to the second, I would again submit inserting the word voting strength, democratic voting strength. But yeah, or electoral strength, either one in that regard. But again, having argued the point, I don't want to waste the committee's time arguing the same thing over and over again. I'm just raising it because I couldn't get the discussion back on the track in the virtual meeting.
Okay. So so you're offering the language, electoral strength as an amendment?
But, sorry, I myself am confusing things a bit now. Can we just stop and get an answer to the question? Is it okay to allocate, is it the intent of the rules that there is perfectly proper to say for a state convention where the delegates to the state convention will end up electing delegates to the national convention? That the delegates can be allocated solely on the basis of of voting strength, as long as they meet the presidential preference, but solely on the basis of population, without regard to Democratic voting strength. I think the way the language reads, the answer should be yes, but there was an argument that was fairly testy in my state, so I'd like to get on the record that the answer is either yes or no.
I think Jim might have a point of view on that.
Well, it's not so much a point of view as a query. Does any state based on, anybody based on their state experience object to this amendment?
It's not an amendment, at this point, it's a
Okay,
ruling. It's basically asking for a point of ruling on what it means. But
The question is,
yeah, go ahead, Frank.
can you allocate state delegates solely based on population? Can you allocate, there's a few questions. Can you allocate delegates solely based on population? Can you allocate solely based on Democratic performance? Or do you have to do some combination of the two? I guess it would probably vary by state.
Yeah.
Why don't you state that, Sean?
Okay, go ahead.
So
Sean's
David, just
gonna
to
state
make
the-
sure, there's
the
a
three
couple of questions here. Question one being, can a state in their body that elects national delegates solely allocate those delegates by population? And then question two would be,
The
can
delegates
they-
to the body, not the national delegate.
Yes.
And I want to be clear, they still have to meet presidential preference requirements if those are involved. It's not.
Correct.
The proportions have to be right. But
Correct. The second question would be, could they solely allocate?
Point of information, I'm sorry, still don't understand the clarifying question.
I think
You were explaining it, but I'm still not following, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Is anybody else not following?
To clarify that.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry for interrupting you, but I'm just,
If you give him a second, I think he'll string it together and it might make just a little bit more sense. And if it doesn't, we'll keep trying.
Yeah.
So there's a few questions, right? Could that body solely be, could you solely use population to apportion those delegates? Question two would be, could you solely use Democratic strength? And then question three would be, do you need to use some combination of the two? And so you're asking, is it acceptable to solely apportion them based on population? And so I feel like it's worth it getting an answer to that question first and then moving to the second one. So could you not take into account Democratic strength and solely apportion those delegates based on, or the state committee members based on population?
Wait, Frank, did you want to?
Yeah, I think we've got two things that are getting a little bit confused here, at least. Under 8, Section 8, it talks about the formula for allocating delegates, and that's based on population, Democratic strength, some combination. It gives you three things. Section 10B talks about the election of the pleos, and then 11 talks about the election of the at-larges. And the question is, can the State Central Committee, your party's state party committee, can that body choose those at-large and pleo delegates, even though it's just based on population? For example, in Virginia, the State Central Committee is based on population. Each congressional district gets representation, doesn't take into account Democratic vote. So I think the answer is yes, if your State Central Committee is based on population, that body can elect the at-large and the pleo delegates.
Right.
I think.
Yeah, Frank is correct, but that also means, as far as I'm concerned, and this is what I want to clarify, that you can allocate the delegates to your state convention, say on the basis of every legislative district gets the same number of delegates to the state convention, versus saying a legislative district that votes 90% Democratic gets twice as many delegates to the state convention as the same population size jurisdiction that's in a red zone. I'm not advocating for either one. I just want to know if that's a political choice that can be made or if it can't. And I think the answer is it can be made for exactly the reasons that we've stated, but that was why I was raising it. There was a big argument in our state when we tried successfully, I think, to experiment with were there better ways to force outreach in red areas to people of color and minorities. When we shifted to equal population, we increased the need for people in red areas to actually reach out to the communities of color in their areas to meet the statewide goals, as opposed to simply saying, well, the city of Seattle will take care of it. We don't need to worry about it. We wanted to experiment with that, and then we got into an argument about whether we could do it by population. That's what led to this question.
Okay. Rick, did you want to add to this discussion right quick?
Sure. So there are 3 ways, according to Rule 10B, that you can choose the statewide selected delegates. You can use a state convention, you can use a quorum of district-level delegates, or you can use your state party. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 only talk about if you're going to use your state party, that you have to explain more information in your delegate selection plan about your state party, including how you apportion membership on the state party if you're going to use that party, and whether you apportion them by population or Democratic voting strength. But if you use a state convention, we aren't asking for that information on apportionment.
Right. But we do have a rule at 8B that imposes certain requirements on how you allocate delegates to a lesser level state or county level convention, and that I want to make sure the same standard applies, that if you want to do it solely based on population, that's fine. If you want to do it solely based on some measure of Democratic strength, that's fine. Or if you want to do a combination, that's fine.
Yes.
That's all I want clarified on that point. Thank you.
Agreed.
Just, I know we have a couple of, we have a couple of people in the queue, but can we go back for those, because I can see the blank stares in the room. And Rick, maybe since you might have given Tom David his answer, can you repeat the discussion and maybe make it a little plainer for people to understand it so that they won't, especially for some of the newer members?
Well, so very basically, district-level delegates are selected within each district by a process used in each congressional district. But when you get to the statewide delegates, the party leader and elected officials and the at-large, you have 3 options that you can use for selecting those delegates. One is you can select them at a state convention. The second is you can use a quorum of district-level delegates to select those people. Or third is you can use your state party, but only if it meets those 5 requirements listed in Rule 10B. And you have to explain in your delegate selection plan how the state party meets those 5 requirements. And one of those requirements is the apportionment of members on the state party. And I can use Florida as an example. We could not use our state party to select delegates because our apportionment of members was just 2 members per county, and we apportioned votes, which is different than what this rule requires. So we've changed our rules to now apportion membership based on population and Democratic voting strength, and so now our state committee could conceivably be used for making that selection since it meets the requirement of Rule 10B1. Does that help explain?
For those that don't understand, we'll maybe do some sidebars on this so that you can get it. So David, do you have a motion that you want to offer, or are you satisfied with the answer?
Well, let me state my understanding, because I don't think I need a motion. It's just my understanding is that under both Rule 8B and 10B, a state has the option to allocate delegates to the body on the basis of population alone, or on the basis of democratic strength alone, or a combination of them. And unless there is disagreement with that proposition, I don't need to make a motion in that respect. And then the other, and I would then shift to the other question, which is a little bit, may also be equally clarified, I suppose, at some point, but does the measure of democratic strength have to have some relationship to how people vote, or can it be related to membership lists or contributor lists or anything else? But I personally would make a motion that we need either to insert the word voting or electoral, and I'll let Elaine make the choice for me as to which one to insert. That in term between the words democratic and strength. So.
Yeah, I move that we insert the word electoral between democratic and strength. I think that would clarify that, because I also think that any other sort of way of assessing this is likely to be not very reliable, and people would play games with it. You can see people playing games with it. So I think that's a good addition. And so I so move.
Okay. Okay, amendment has been offered. If you look at the screen, she added electoral strength. Is there any objection to the amendment? Without objection? Wait. Well, I guess we do want to, Sham is asking, do you want us to go back to 8B and clarify as well?
Yeah.
That was going to be the next thing, would be to, Elaine, can you make that amendment with respect to both 10B and 8B?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
That's
yes, I can.
That's my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So is there, that's the amendment. Is there any objection? Without objection? Oh, Wendy, you have a question? Okay, she has a different question. Without objection, the amendment is included in 8B and 10B. Electoral strength. Okay, Wendy?
Thank you, Wendy Davis from Georgia. I have to sort through my layer of questions, that some of which have been answered now. But again, just looking ahead without having looked ahead yet, from what Mr. Boylan just said, if this same criteria holds for at-large, then my state committee probably shouldn't have been picking at-large people. Are we going to have that same criteria in the next section?
So our rules say that if you can use the groups in Rule 10B, you can use that process for electing party leaders and elected officials and at large, or you can use a different process for selecting your at-large than you do your party leaders and elected officials. The only thing you can't change is the requirement of how many delegates the presidential candidate has the right to strike down to. You can, if you use 2 for 1 or 1 for 1, you have to use the same on both systems.
But if you're saying that Rule 10B, those 5 criteria have to apply.
Yes.
And my state committee is not apportioned, it's apportioned the way you said yours was before, like every county gets at least a certain number. Is the fact that some counties get more close enough to being population-ish?
So that's up to this committee to decide when we review the delegates, when you review the delegate selection plan. But yes, that's why we ask that if you're going to use your state committee, that you have to explain how you apportion the membership on your state committees to see if, in this committee's opinion, it meets that requirement.
Okay. And then one more thing about B10, B4. Help me understand what we're trying to say. They shall have been elected no earlier. That means that you had to have elections since the last convention. Is that what we're trying to say there?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, somebody could have been elected previously other times. You're
This-
just saying we have to have freshened it up since the last convention.
Yes, and this is a part of the McGovern-Fraser Commission reforms where basically state parties were selecting delegates that had been chosen years before and had not had any like re-election that kind of freshened them up, as you said. And so the McGovern-Fraser Commission inserted this requirement to make sure that the body that was doing the election was more current.
Thank you.
Steph? Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Steph Kapayawi in New Jersey. I apologize for this very dumb question, but basis of population, is that just determined by the census?
Yes.
Thank you.
Carol?
I just want to clarify what Rick said, that what the McGovern-Fraser Commission said was those old white guys can't do it all anymore. Is that what they were saying?
Okay, I think this concludes our discussion on Rules 10A and B. We will now move to Rule 11. Jim?
And so before we begin our discussion of Rule 11, Sean will provide a brief overview of Rule 11.
Thank you, co-chairs. Rule 11 covers the selection of at-large delegates and effectively states that you can use at-large delegates to achieve gender balance and affirmative action goals. It requires proportional allocation based on statewide results, or the first determining step, and then also applies equal division and representation requirements for the full delegation.
Thank you. Any questions for Sean about that? All right. Yes, David.
I have a question about the rule or a proposed amendment. I don't have a question of Sean. I didn't know
That's all right. Go ahead.
whether I meant to have my card up at the proper time or whether you had more to do before you got
That's all
there.
right. Go ahead.
Sorry, David McDonald, Washington. In Rule 11A, partway down, it says, delegates and alternates shall each as a group be equally divided, and to the extent possible, it goes on. Do we have a similar requirement for equal division within presidential preferences? And if so, where is it? And if not, then I would propose to add into this sentence language so that it would read, delegates and alternates shall each as a group and within each presidential preference be equally divided to the extent possible. So, but I don't want to add redundant language if it exists elsewhere, so I just flagged it.
Okay. I think Rick is trying to see if it's added anywhere else before we move. It is. Okay.
It is not a requirement because depending on your automatic delegates, the at-large category may be predominantly male or female, and so you can't require the presidential candidates to give you an equally divided list because you may not be able to elect an equally divided list.
Well, I would think that's the point of the to the extent practicable language that we always use. Yeah, I just want to be clear whether we have a requirement that presidential campaigns are expected to try to meet equal division or have a good explanation for why they can't, as opposed to doing some type of a deal between them that I have a huge number of male donors that I couldn't get elected, so I need to put them on this slate. And I'll do that, and I'll give you a bunch of females to put on your side or something that screws up the allocation of influence within presidential delegations. I think we want to keep that equally divided as well.
Jason, would you like to speak to that?
I mean, I can just speak from my own personal perspective as we've balanced the Wisconsin delegation over a number of years. It was the campaigns negotiating between the remaining at-large delegates and deciding, negotiating, hey, I need this person, and it wasn't equally divided by gender, but it was equally divided within the affirmative action goals to meet the criteria. But at one campaign saying, oh, I really need this person on this, can I have this? And gender-wise, it did not necessarily balance between the presidential preference, but it balanced overall in the at-large portion.
Right, and there's a difference between goals, which are flexible to you want to meet them however you can, and the fairly mandatory equal division requirement. And that's why I wanted to find out if it's in there or not. And if not, I would suggest that we put it in to make it clear that equal division is a responsibility of presidential campaigns as well as state parties.
All right, David?
Hi, Dave Wynn, New York. I've done slating for presidential campaigns since, I think, 2008 now. And I would say it's quite difficult already on presidential campaigns. They work with the other presidential preferences to make sure we're equally divided across the state. But once you get it even close, if you're going to make another mandate on presidential campaigns that you have to make sure your delegation's equally divided, it becomes really difficult because there are moments where there are really important people that one presidential campaign has to have, but they just don't have enough. They may have only one candidate, right? Or two candidates, two delegates. And it just becomes virtually impossible for them to be able to slate both of those individuals. So I actually think keeping it the way it is probably the best way. It's most helpful not only for presidential campaigns, but I think in many ways for state parties too, to be able to take care of folks who are really important, that make sure that they meet the diversity requirements, the affirmative goals that are put in place. So those are my thoughts.
Andre?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Andre Triber from Texas. I guess I just want to be direct. This is a question for the author of the amendment. Is the intention of this ultimately to ban the horse trading between different presidential campaigns? Because I can give an example, for instance, of one that I've witnessed. That's naming a group I'm part of. In a primary that has happened within the past couple decades, there was one candidate in my state that had many more young delegates behind them compared to the other candidate, and so there was an example where one campaign was trading, quote, young spots over to that campaign to be able to fill those, and so our whole delegation had the proper amount of young delegates towards our goal, but it was not equal amounts of young delegates between the two presidential campaigns. So that's one example, but is that the kind of behavior that this amendment would stop from being able to occur moving forward?
As the author of the amendment, it has nothing to do with that. It has solely to do with equal division. It has nothing to do with affirmative action goals, nothing to do with diversity goals. It is purely a question of whether in their allocation of influence in their delegations, presidential campaigns are expected to give men and women equal treatment the same way that state parties are required to. But it doesn't have anything to do with how they may have to horse trade to meet affirmative action goals.
Alicia.
Thank you. Alicia Andrews from Oklahoma. I'd like to speak to this. I agree with what David is saying, but we have had presidential candidates in my state try to give me a list that wasn't anywhere near equally gender divided, and it's a matter of having a discussion, but I agree with Andre T. here that we don't want to prohibit the horse trading because it doesn't get adversarial, and what we are most trying to do is work well with the campaigns and make sure that we have a delegation that works together and feels like there's representation. And I fear if we put too many rules and restrictions, we're inviting confrontation with the campaigns that I don't think we necessarily want.
Gary?
Gary Shea, California. I'd like to point out that, at least the way I understand this, is that the entire delegation is supposed to be balanced in the at-large by gender, but if we were to change this to also do it by presidential candidate, let's suppose that you had 3 or 4 candidates who got delegates, each one could be off by 1, thereby creating an imbalance within the whole delegation.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Carol?
Well, it seems to me that what happens in a small state, just like retail politics is what happens in a small state. In a small state, you get a back room with the state chair and the representatives of the presidential candidates like Dave, and the state chair says, okay, coming out of this at-large, we've got to have 14 men and 7 women, or whatever it takes to balance the delegation. How are you folks going to help me do this, or do I have to order you what to do? And it gets worked out. I don't think we've ever ended up with, with a problem when they get to the convention. So, sometime you just have to let people work it out for themselves.
So, Carol, are you arguing that there is no need for an amendment here then?
I think it's worked so far, but, if,
All right, back to you, David.
sometime we nitpick things to death.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, could I,
David
somebody
next,
else?
and then Elaine.
Let me make one comment, and then I'll simplify this, because unless somebody seconds my motion after this, you will not need to take a vote, because I have not heard a second for my motion in the speech. I've been in those back rooms in the negotiation that you're talking about over the years, and what has been missing, but we, in most years, had state chairs with the strength to do this, is the ability to tell presidential campaigns that at the congressional district level, they need to start balancing their delegations by gender so that they don't deliver to the back room a situation where they have set up that one campaign is just managed to get like 75% males out of all the congressional districts, and now they're going to lean on the other campaign with whom they may be adversarial to say, you need to do something. What we were always able to sometimes, with some confrontational aspects, is say the presidential campaigns have got to minimize the problem that they're going to deliver to the state party when we go to do the at-large. And we know going into it our at-larges, because the PLEOs are going to be overwhelmingly male, so you campaigns need to, where you have the option in your approval list to make sure you've got enough women appointed and so on and so forth. It was to reduce the problem. But as I said, I'm just articulating an experience and trying to give some extra leverage, and if nobody seconds it, we don't need to have the vote. I do talk a lot, but I don't try to beat things to death. So if there's no reason to go on, then let's not.
All right, Elaine?
Yeah, I was just going to say, listening to this and listening to everybody's experience, I'm not sure we need a rule on this. I think that yes, sometimes there could be difficult, but I'm not sure we need to complicate this with a rule. As far as I can tell, we've had pretty good equal division in our last couple of conventions. I mean, it's not like people are using this to get around equal division. So I'm just worried. Sometimes, you get too complicated in these things, and the states they're smart, they can work it out, and it sounds to me like most of them do, even though, granted, I'm sure it's difficult at times. So I would just say let's not pursue this as a rule, if that's okay, David.
Do I hear a second? No, I don't. So we are going to move on, but I think we've explored this thoroughly. Carol?
Just one question. If we leave it as it is, could a state party put something in their delegate selection rules that would help them say Washington State has struggled with this, and they want to specify some things in their rules that are not necessarily in the delegate selection rules. Could they do that?
As long as it doesn't conflict with these rules, yes. If it supplements these rules, yes. If it conflicts with these rules, no. Sort of like the Supreme Court standard on state parties making rules that are different from state law. Wendy?
Thank you. Wendy Davis from Georgia. We have, again, my experience is just in Georgia, not in fully digesting all the elements here yet, being new to this committee. But we have always had each level of delegate selection had to be gender balanced. And so is that just like something we made up, or is it just a healthy standard and it's not in the rules?
That is rule.
Okay, because I just heard my colleagues say that they have ungender balanced congressional district delegations.
Rick?
Your district level delegates have to be balanced within each district and by presidential candidate and as a whole among all district level delegates. But when you get to the statewide delegates, you factor in the automatic delegates, so you may not be able to do equal division. You may have to have all of your at-large delegates, as the rule says, you may have to dedicate all the at-large delegates to one gender in order to be able to ensure that at the end of the day, all of your delegates are equally divided, all of your alternates are equally divided. So that is not a requirement, but it's basically the particular state's math of how they have to do that based on if there was maybe an imbalance of one for your district level delegates plus your automatic delegates, and then who you elected as your party leader and elected official delegates. You may have to then, adjust your at-large delegates.
Yeah. Makes perfect sense. I just heard that other states had wildly imbalanced district level, and it confused me, so never mind.
Nope. Okay. No, the DNC will not approve your district level delegates if they are not equally divided. They won't certify them, they'll send them back. And if the delegates as a whole, once you've elected your at-large delegates, if you certify your statewide delegates and your overall delegates are not equally divided, the DNC won't certify those. They'll tell you you have to go back and fix it. And as same applies to your alternates.
All right. Anybody else on this rule? Yes, Donna.
Some days I get deja vu. I'm laughing because I can attest that the DNC has always been very diligent in protecting this role with presidential campaigns. And I was laughing when Dave, also known as Delegate Dave, but back in the day, before many of you were born, and no, I'm just not referring to you, Stephanie, some other young people in the room. I remember when Arizona would tell us that they could not find Native Americans, and I would laugh and say, seriously? And Connecticut could not find women, and California had a problem finding lesbians. So we've come a long way as a party, but also our presidential candidates take this very seriously. And the folks who must comply with the rules, whether it's a political director or delegate person, et cetera. So this has been a strong rule. And I've seen over the years, especially since 2000, I've seen this party and all of the state parties really comply with it. So I don't think we need to make any changes.
Any further discussion on this rule? David?
But not on the subject we were just discussing, but on this rule. I have two other issues to raise, one of which I think is just editorial. partway down in Rule 11C, we refer to the fourth line up, the time at large delegates are selected, his/her allocation. Can we change that his/her to a their to remove the gender exclusion that's there? I think that's editorial. And then my other point is a little bit more substantive.
So is there any objection to that change? Without objection, so ordered.
Then in the line preceding it, and we've had this discussion years past, we say if a presidential candidate entitled to an allocation under the rule is no longer a candidate, and then it goes on. And I believe last time ended up trying to clarify what it meant to be no longer a candidate in the regulations. But I'm wondering if we should now move that into the rules so that people know going in that if their candidate withdraws, what happens to the at-large seats that they might have had, or what more realistically happens. They don't withdraw. They're still candidate for contribution purposes and everything else. And so this becomes ambiguous. And I think what we ended up doing in the regs last time was something along the lines of if they're no longer actively seeking delegates towards the nomination, that they're deemed to be no longer a candidate. But in the rule itself now, it's still ambiguous.
Can I add to that? I
Elaine?
think it also, I never sort of realized this before, but I always assumed when a candidate withdrew, their delegates were uncommitted, and other candidates went after that. They were formally uncommitted. Here it says, shall be proportionally divided among the other preferences entitled to an allocation. So does that mean that uncommitted has to break the 15% threshold on the ballot and get, so that's what you're shaking your head yes on that. Okay, because I think in past years, I mean, I remember in the Mondale campaign, we spent days going after uncommitted delegates who were not uncommitted because of the ballot. They were uncommitted because other candidates had dropped out. And then a big, when you have a wide open system like we have, you're going to have a lot of candidates who win one or two delegates, and then they're gone. I don't know that we want to divide them among the other. Why wouldn't they become free agents then?
I didn't write that part of the rule. I just raised the question a couple cycles ago when it came up because of, I think it was the year that Buttigieg and everybody kind of the day after Iowa decided to withdraw, but had already earned delegates. And then there was an argument over what happened with their committee slots because they weren't actually out of the race. In some cases, they were still on the ballot because they couldn't get their name off, and they still needed to pay their debt, so they were still fundraising. So technically, they were still candidates. And I think at that point, we did something to the extent practicable that Chair Roosevelt came up with, and then we later embedded it into the rules. But we have it hanging out, and we're going into a year where we could have a lot of starts, small numbers of delegates accumulated, and then suspensions of campaigns going in and have the problem come up and arguably come up in a close election where it might make a difference. So I do think it needs to be discussed and potentially clarified in the rules. It may not be something we can do on the fly today. It may be that we need to revisit it and just when we put it on the table, it's an issue that you need to think about and maybe come back.
That's right. And if you suspend your campaign, right? If you suspend your campaign, the meaning is you might pick it up at some time down the road. So if you automatically are giving away delegates, right, then you've given away delegates that somebody has won. And I think a lot of presidential candidates, even if they know they're losing, still want to keep their delegates. And there's the issue of do we ask them to formally release their delegates? For instance, if they get out, do we ask them to release their delegates and let them go to another campaign? or let them go to uncommitted. I mean, I think this is a sort of, we haven't had to deal with this for a while. I think we're going to have to deal with it this time.
Raymond?
It's Gary.
Oh, Gary first, I'm sorry.
Okay, this particular, Gary Shea, California, this particular section only deals with the at-large, so these are determined after they have dropped out. This is not talking about the reallocation of the district-level delegates that might be able to be dealt with in a different section, but I think we've kind of jumped ahead and mixed the two together here.
I mean, Gary, I think you're right, because I just think we have a big question about campaigns suspend, what does it mean when they suspend, and what do we do with their delegates? And it seems to me that apportioning them to the winners may not be, in fact, what the voters intended, and that we may want to revive an uncommitted, opportunity.
If I could, Gary, that's not right. What this does say is if you go through this congressional district level and you had 15% of the congressional district delegates, but then you suspend your campaign because you just gotten a cancer diagnosis or something and so you suspend the campaign. This rule says, okay, you lose all your at-large delegates that you would otherwise have been, and they're given away. And then the doctor calls back and says, whoops, clerical error in the back office. That was somebody else's diagnosis. And you say, time to restart the campaign. And you say, wait a minute, while I wasn't looking, I lost, 5 delegates. That's the situation we're talking about, which is a bit of an elaboration on what
That's
could have
basically
happened
what I
with
said.
Songus.
Is that we're talking about the at-large here.
Yeah, at-large and pleos, everything
Right.
upstream.
But not the district level, which is what the conversations seem to be talking about.
No,
Okay.
it's, yeah.
Thank you.
Raymond?
This was all very much a very, very real nightmare for us in 2020 because our at-large and pleo occurs in April, and the presidential candidates at that point were significantly different than they were when the New Hampshire primary occurred. Just since everyone's just kind of throwing stuff out, I received a phone call from the Biden campaign saying, here are 9 candidates for pleo and at-large. And I said, but you didn't get 15%. You're not, I can't consider you. Which, nobody's campaign likes having a state chair telling you they're wrong. But it ended up being because the other candidates had suspended but not ended. And so Pete was allowed to have extra delegates. Amy Klobuchar received other delegates, and Senator Sanders received other delegates. Now, subsequently, everyone voted for Biden anyways, but we still don't really have that conundrum of what if the person who is the presumed nominee what if something happens? Let's just not even take something happens between those 2 periods where suddenly somebody's our nominee that wasn't on the ballot in earlier states. Are they eligible to get those delegates or not? And I know we're getting into the weeds. Sorry, Wendy, I can see your face, but it was pretty intense. I'm not a lawyer, but I thought I could clearly read what this says, and trying to fight back against all of them, and eventually that's what we did. And without our presumed nominee having received 15%, I just could not read where they would be eligible in that next round.
Can I add to that? That to me is the attraction of uncommitted, because you've got a delegate duly elected, right, in an early state. Their candidate drops out. If they're given to somebody else, right, then that somebody else says, yes, I got another one. But if they're uncommitted, then guess what? Eventually they'll probably all go to the winner. But, if the candidate comes back in, has a win down the road, or somebody else drops out and they say, I'm going to start my campaign again, that person is still there who was elected to represent them. So I just think that given all the various permutations you can have, especially in a multi-candidate field, that if we allow them to be uncommitted, allow the candidates, the delegates to be uncommitted if their candidate has dropped out, then it takes care of all of these problems, right? They're still there, they were still elected, the candidate changes his mind, the cancer diagnosis comes back as negative. The person's still there, and they can, at that point, of course, they may want to abandon their candidate, but, I just think the uncommitted gives us a flexibility that we may need this time around.
Frank?
Yeah, quickly, if we're going to postpone the discussion of this, I think we should probably do that because we've got limited time today. But I would say that the district level delegates remain committed. I think this is the point Gary was trying to get at. Even if the candidate is no longer a candidate, he or she still keeps their district level delegates. So the question is what happens to the at-large, and the problem of a presumed nominee, for example, dropping out before the at-large are selected, and no candidate getting 15% is a challenge. So that's one thing that we should consider. In terms of what no longer a candidate means, I'm fine with leaving it up to the candidate. I don't think we should spend a lot of time trying to micromanage that. At the district level, the candidate keeps their delegates. If they've suspended their campaign and they want to keep their delegates, they should keep their delegates.
By the way, if they keep their delegates, but their name is not put into nomination at the convention, the delegates have in fact become uncommitted, and they get to choose who they're going to vote for. So, I mean, it all works itself out.
So I think we've surfaced a lot of issues here. I think we want to suspend this and think it over a little more and come back to it. So I'm going to, does anyone have any further comments on Rule 11?
So we're suspending Rule 11?
I'm going to turn it over to you, then.
Okay.
And I'm going to step out for a minute.
Okay. Sorry. Moving on to Rule 12. Will you give a quick overview?
Yes, thank you, Co-Chair. Rule 12 is timing of the delegate selection process. It establishes the permissible window for the first determining steps. It requires all other delegate selection steps to occur within the convention year and allows limited waivers subject to DNC approval.
Okay. Members, the floor is open for discussion and amendments as we review the rule in chronological order. 12A. Is there any amendments to 12A? Steph?
Not an amendment, just a question. Do we limit it to second Tuesday in June just for logistics purposes for planning convention or anything like that?
I'm sorry, what was, I didn't.
Why do we limit it to the second Tuesday in June? Is it just for planning purposes for convention?
Yes,
Okay.
part of that. Mhm. Any further discussion on 12A? Seeing none, we can move on to 12B. Any questions or amendments to 12B? Okay, well, maybe we can take a 5-minute break if there's no questions on 12A or B. those are good to go. We will move on to 13, take a 5-minute break. Give Jim a chance to get back. is 14.
All right,
Fair
we're turning to
reflection of
Rule
presidential
13.
preferences.
And Sham, would you give us a brief overview?
Do we have everybody?
Pretty much.
We have a quorum.
All right. Rule 13 covers presidential preference. It requires all delegate candidates to declare a single presidential preference or uncommitted status, grants presidential campaigns a defined right of approval over pledged delegate slates, and protects delegates from being forced to vote against their stated preference.
Okay, thank you, Sham. The floor is open for discussion and amendments as we review the rule. Starting with Rule 13A, do members have any proposed amendments? Hearing none, let's move to 13B. Ms. Fowler.
I'm sorry, back to A. We just need a comma after including uncommitted, and then in line 48.
A, need a comma after,
After uncommitted.
without objection, so ordered. Okay, on 13B, does anyone have anything? 13C. Any proposed amendments? To which?
There was a staff amendment to Rule 13B.
Sean, would you explain that, and then we'll get someone to move it?
Yeah, sorry, just to remind folks, Rule 13B, there was an amendment in the proposed draft to strike the last sentence, which says persons wishing to be elected as pledged party leader and elected official delegates shall comply with Rule 10B3. Just a reminder that Rule 10B3 just says such delegates are elected at a public meeting subsequent to the election of district level delegates. It's already in there, and we recommended striking it because it's redundant.
So that's for consistency, basically. Any objection? No. Okay, hearing none. Then we'll go back to 13C. Any amendments? 13D, any amendments? David?
David McDonald, Washington. 13D addresses the presidential right of approval, the ability to declare people ineligible to run and be elected as a delegate pledged to that candidate. And what I want to clarify is, as the rule is written, I would read it to say the only basis on which a presidential candidate can decline to let somebody run is that that person is not a bona fide supporter of the candidate. But it does require the candidate to let somebody run who disagrees with them on issues, thinks that they're the best person to be president, but doesn't agree with them 100% on the issues, or whether the candidate can go through and strike people who might disagree with them on issues, even though they've contributed and volunteered and everything else for the campaign. It says, as I read it, I think it says the only basis is bona fide. But again, I'd like to be clear that if there's any other basis that they can strike somebody on, then we should write it into the rules and give people notice. A related question will come up under 13K as to what it means to say that a delegate shall represent in good conscience the sentiments of those who elected them. Clearly, that applies to you should vote for the nominee that you're pledged to, unless there's a really good reason not to. But does it also mean that you should reflect the issues positions of the people that elected you, particularly if you ran for election on the basis that as a delegate you were going to advocate for an issue, and then you get into that box?
Did someone else want to speak on that issue? Yes, Alicia?
I want to make sure, thank you, Alicia Andrews from Oklahoma. In this last cycle, we had the campaign, right, reject a candidate for consideration because in 2024, that candidate was pledged for a candidate that then they turned out to not support publicly. And so they were rejected outright for that reason. I don't know how you would word something like that, David, but I think we need to allow the flexibility for a campaign to say, this person's a bad actor, I don't want him.
No, to answer the question, I think that's perfectly valid. Somebody pretends to be pledged to a candidate, but they're out campaigning for another candidate or whatever. That's not a bona fide supporter. The more crystalline issue is I support candidate A because I think they're the best candidate, but they're really wrong on this one issue. Pick something from the Middle East, for example, and I want to advocate for something different in the platform and continue to push it, but I clearly am going to advocate that people vote for them. Can they be stricken because they may disagree with the candidate downstream based on the platform, even though they support the candidate? I read this to say they couldn't be, but if the campaigns think that they can exclude people based on disagreements on issues, even though they really are bona fide, maybe even longtime supporters, then we should make it clear that they can be stricken on that basis. And I think this is likely to be an issue in a multi-candidate field, much more than it is when we had an incumbent. So,
Carol?
When we have had candidates strike delegate candidates, we do almost every time. But in most of the time, it is because that, you know, they've got a criminal record and they, or something like that, or that the candidate is trying to achieve affirmative action goals and trying to skew the ballot in a way that they meet the affirmative action goals or the equal division. I mean, that's the most common reason we have for people to be struck. And I don't know if we want to spell that out.
Frank? Oh, Gary, I'm sorry, Gary and then Frank.
Gary Shea, California. Whether or not we allow it is a different question, but I will say, as just a matter of evidence for the committee, that it did happen in California where people were struck for their views as opposed to what candidate they supported. Thank you.
I have seen a whole variety of reasons people have been struck, some of which candidates want to explain and some of which they don't.
Yeah. That's right.
Frank?
Yeah, the candidate has to leave at least 3 candidates for each district level position, and he just may want to get rid of everybody else. I mean, I'm not aware of a process that we have to examine campaigns, we being state party, or anybody else, to examine campaigns and look within their souls to identify the real reasons why they're taking actions. I mean, they're allowed, they can determine what is bona fide, and I don't see a process, nor do I think there should be a process of the state party interfering with that selection.
Elaine?
Yeah, I agree with Frank on this, and I just think I think it's impossible to figure out, right? And there's not time for everybody to go asking the candidate, well, why did you strike this person? Why didn't you, et cetera? But I do think, David, there's a point later on in K but I think here, I think just David's got 2 issues here, and I think we should leave this one alone, but the K issue is a different story.
David?
So I don't think we should leave it alone, but I'm not advocating for a strict interpretation. I think to avoid confusion, what we should do is change the language to say shall be considered eligible to be elected unless the candidate signifies otherwise. And just make it clear, it's an absolute right of approval. They can pick them or not, but don't create a potential challenge down the road that I was a bona fide supporter, but so-and-so didn't like my view, and now I'm being discriminated, so on and so forth. It opens the door to some messy stuff. So let's just take the bona fide language out. Yeah, just so I would propose to change the language to read, all such delegate and alternate candidates shall be considered eligible for election, pledged to that presidential candidate, or election as a supporter of the presidential candidate whom they have pledged to support unless the presidential candidate signifies otherwise. Just get rid of the bona fide concept and say either the presidential campaign wants them there or doesn't, because that's what the reality is. Yeah, and there are lots of reasons why they wouldn't want them to be there. There's all these balancing issues. Let's get rid of the confusion. So,
Okay, is there a second for that amendment?
Yeah, I second that.
Have a second. Anyone else like to speak on that? Any objection to that? It's on the screen.
I could read it.
Go ahead, read it.
Okay. All right, Chair? Okay. All right, so without objection, that amendment is added. All right. Then we'll move on to, that's 13D, 13E. Anyone have any comment? 13F.
Sorry. E. There's the, we're using the language bona fide. Do we need to clarify?
In what, 13E?
Yeah. From the list of eligible.
Yes, so 13E needs to be made consistent by striking the words bona fide. Without objection.
Or are we just striking the word bona fide or putting eligible here?
Yeah. All right, David? Frank, I'm sorry.
Frankly, I do see 13F also has a bona fide in the last two lines.
Which one is he saying?
and it has a his, her.
Wow, that really slipped through it. 13F, the second to the last line, change his, her to their,
Yeah.
and change bona fide to eligible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hit.
Okay.
Just do a Google search.
There's a number of places. Do you want to ask if anyone objects to us conforming
Yeah.
to that language?
Is there any objection to conforming with regard to the word bona fide throughout this rule? Jason?
I get changing all of them. When we say H, I actually think we may want to look at different language, because H is not around bona fide supporters of a candidate. H is around must be a bona fide Democrat to get elected, which is a very different type of thing in H than it is saying.
Correct. That should be maintained and let the record show that. Okay.
I'm sorry.
On F, and maybe somewhere else too, I can't read as fast as y'all can, but to remove from that list persons not confirmed by the presidential candidate or his representatives, can we not just put a period there, and rather than saying as supporters of the presidential candidate? They may be supporters of that presidential candidate, but they're removed for another reason, and you don't necessarily want to have to say, I'm taking you off because you're not a supporter. I'm taking you off
I've
because
actually seen
you're...
those happen, yes. I've seen that happen.
Yeah. I mean, I'm taking you off because you're a criminal, or you're a man, or whatever reason you're taking them off, just you're taking them off.
Right. So any objection to that amendment?
Which section are we talking about and where?
Presidential candidates may remove any candidate for an at-large and party leader from the list. How about just from the list as long as, at a minimum? Just take out of bona fide supporters. And then there's somewhere else, I think.
I'm sorry, Carol, do you mind if we actually go back to E, because in E2 we have
Yeah,
the word, or
E2.
E1 we have bona fide, E2 we have bona fide, and just make sure that we get the language the committee wants here, and we can go sequentially.
Yep.
So in E1, I've switched bona fide to eligible from the list of eligible supporters.
Yeah, good.
All right, and then E2, so pledge party leader.
From the list of eligible.
50-51.
Yeah.
All right, so now we're through, okay, and then we're going down from the list of eligible again.
Yeah.
All right, and now we can go to,
Screen is not, it doesn't work for me.
yeah.
This is the one to the
Yeah.
cataract surgery.
All right, sorry, Carol, can you go back to F?
Oh, on 75 and 76, I think, and to remove from that list persons not confirmed by the presidential candidate or his representatives, period.
Yes.
We can't just have it.
I think we agreed to that, yeah.
That's, yeah, it's on the screen, right?
Okay.
Yep. What she wants on the screen, yeah.
They are representative. Period.
Yeah.
Carol, are we all set?
I think that's, Jason tells me it's right. I'm struggling with reading that screen, but,
It matches what we have on paper, the chance.
yeah, yeah. Okay, thanks,
All
sorry,
right.
y'all.
Except the G's deleted.
So without
Yeah.
objection, those changes are ordered. Okay. So that's E, 13E. 13F,
That was 13F. That was 13F.
that was F, I'm sorry. 13H, no, 13G. And Wendy?
Wendy Davis, Georgia. Are we still working on bona fides, or are we talking about the sections now?
I think we've dealt with bona fide, yeah.
Okay, so if I'm reading section E correctly, it says that district level, the campaigns have to leave at least 3 names per slot. But for at-large and Pleo, they can leave 1 or 2, depending on what the state party puts in their delegate selection plan. I just want to make sure I'm reading that right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Carol, would you want to comment on that?
No, I just wanted to be clear that they can leave as many as they want to. It just can't strike below that minimum. So if they want to leave a dozen people on there, it's okay, which they frequently do because they
Right.
don't want to pick and choose.
But this is a minimum.
Okay, but I'm particularly, that's E2, I'm reading correctly, that whether they can strike all the way down to just 1 person per slot, it would be up to the state to make that determination.
Yeah.
We're not, that's not like a recommendation from us.
It's not a recommendation, it's not a requirement. Right. And
Thank you, just wanted to
different states
clarify.
have done it differently, right? Okay. Anything else in E, F, or G? All right, Anybody have anything in H? Or I? Or J? David?
David McDonald, Washington. I misspoke earlier when I said it was 13K. I wanted to talk about it. Turns out to be 13J. 13J is the rule that says that delegates elected to the National Convention are to represent the sentiments of those who elected them. And it's significant that it follows 13I, which specifically says that they are, it can't be compelled to vote for anyone other than the presidential preference that they have, which includes pledging. But J is potentially a little bit broader, and I want to highlight that and make sure we all have the same understanding. I don't know how many other people have had this experience. I've had to work with delegations where the delegates come from either states or districts that have very strong views on certain issues. And during the convention, their presidential candidate does a deal with the other candidate to water down a platform or whatever. And then you have to convince the delegates to vote for it. And in my mind, it's not an acceptable argument to say the candidate wants this, it doesn't matter what your district thinks. It is an acceptable argument to say as a delegate, you need to balance whether the sentiments of the people who elected you are, it's more important to get the candidate elected, or it's more important to make this point. If there's a contrary view that this only applies to the question of if your presidential candidate turns out to be an axe murderer in June and you thought they were a great person in January, do you still have to vote for them? If that's all it applies to, then we should be clear about that. But if it has the broader meaning that I attribute to it, then I think we should be clear about that as well.
Jim?
Elaine?
I think this is a very, very powerful clause, or very, very powerful rule. This was the rule that got us out of an enormous mess in 2024, and I think we did the best we could, frankly, after that, and thank God for this rule. I don't think it was ever intended to mandate that every single vote in the convention be determined, be locked in according to your presidential preference. And I can actually remember when the Hunt Commission wrote this rule. They wrote it as a result of the very tempestuous 1980 convention. And I don't think anybody ever thought that the presidential preference would be binding on a platform or a credentials vote or anything like that. So I think the rule stands as it is, and I think you're right that it should reflect the sentiments of those who elected them. So a situation where a congressional district goes for one candidate, but they've got very strong views about some issue. I mean, I think though that's the presidential candidate's problem, not our problem. If they can't figure out how to convince their delegates to go where they are, or to understand the the context of a compromise, okay, because that could happen too, then again, that's their problem, and I don't think it's our problem.
Wendy? Okay. All right. So, David?
In light of Elaine's comments, unless there's some disagreement inside the committee, I'm happy to simply have the legislative history that we had the discussion and not propose any changes to the language. We now know what it means and have a record of what it means.
That's what I was going to suggest.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think
All
that's...
right. Anything further on 13K? 13J, rather, yeah. Michael Cab?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Michael Kapp from California. I had an amendment for after 13J, but if anyone has anything more on 13J,
Do we have anything more
I'll
on
defer.
13J?
Okay, great. But before I get to my amendment, I want to acknowledge the conversations that I've had with many of my colleagues here, especially Secretary Ray, who gave me their time and their candor. Those conversations helped shape where I landed. The goal of my original amendment was straightforward. After delegates are selected, the public should be able to see who they are, how they were elected, and which candidate they're pledged to. I believe that information should be accessible and machine readable. And aggregate demographic data on our convention participants should not go unused, but instead it should help inform our work in setting meaningful and achievable diversity goals. But after discussion with Secretary Ray, this subject more properly falls within the call, not the rules that we're acting on today. So I am withdrawing my amendment, and I'll bring an updated version at a more appropriate time. I very much appreciate my colleagues' engagement and look forward to continuing this work. Thank you.
Appreciate your explanation. Thank you. Anything else on 13? Okay, Elaine?
Elaine K. Mark, Virginia. K2, okay, K2. It is further determined that these requirements are in addition to the requirements set forth by the United States Constitution and any law of the United States. Where'd that come from? I mean, and the reason I bring it up is that the Supreme Court has given us the right under the First Amendment, freedom of association, many, many times, okay, in many different decisions, to say that the state party, because we are under the freedom of association, a party, can make any rules it wants to, even if it is in contradiction to laws of the United States. That goes all the way back to the Illinois. It's frequently brought up in terms of our authority to set the time, even though New Hampshire has a law. I mean, it's there. Why is this here?
I think this was intentionally phrased as that these are in addition to requirements set forth in the Constitution of the laws. And that's what the Supreme Court decision allows.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
I see. That's why it's in here. It's kind of weird. I don't know that we even
It's weird
need it
because
at
of
all.
that Supreme Court decision, right?
Okay. All right. Well, that's fine. But it just did strike me as kind of contradictory.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Anything else on, we have Barry, Steph, and Gary, and I have to apologize. I have to go be parliamentarian at our state convention. I'm going to miss my plane if I don't leave now, so I'm going to turn it back to my co-chair. Thank you all for some really good discussion as well as attention to the presentations. Thank you. That's the goal. I'm all set.
You good?
Yeah.
Do we want to move Rick down? Do we want to move Rick down, or you? Yeah, in case we got some constitutional questions. We only have 14 left, right? So do we want to go ahead with Barry's?
Yeah.
Barry, did you want to go ahead?
Yeah, just quickly in response to Elaine, which I was talking about, to me, 2 covers like you're 35, you're a citizen. There are all these laws that we don't have in 1AB that, in theory, if we took that out, to me, that would give, DNC blessing to somebody 21 who wants to run for president. It's okay with us. But so to me, I just saw that as encompassing things that we don't have to cover in a long list.
Right. Steph?
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Steph Campagna in New Jersey. I think this might be more of a question on the history of this, but in K1, 1A, we say that to be a candidate, you must be registered to vote and shall have been registered to vote in the last election, but we don't explicitly say that you have to have voted in the last election. Is there any reason why we don't have that you must have voted in the last election? I don't know if there was some
Yeah,
committee or act or people
be
that decided
registered,
this a while ago, and I just didn't know the context.
Well, let me
I was asking
answer
Elaine
that
mostly,
and-
yeah.
And going to Carol. I mean, did Lyndon LaRouche actually vote?
in the Democratic primary.
I don't remember. I
yeah.
remember having to have extra security
Oh, I
from
remember
his
him.
supporters.
Yeah, he
but
drove us crazy.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure I follow the question. Can you repeat the question again, Steph?
We say that you must be registered to vote and shall have been registered to vote, but we don't say that you had to have voted. Like, you didn't have to cast a ballot, you just have to be a voter. So I think voting, the act of voting, is the bare minimum for when you're seeking the office of president or vice president.
Helen, she has a question.
In all states, the identity of the registered voters is public information. Not every state records and makes public who actually went to the polls and voted. So if that becomes a requirement here, and it's not recorded or made accessible by the specific state of residence, it becomes a disqualifier.
Perfect. That's all I wanted to know. I was like, there's probably a reason. Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Elaine.
Thank you. Gary?
A question and a statement. In any part of these rules or the call or whatever, do we in any way talk about electors, presidential electors?
We brought them up. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so that's what I think this clause is really about.
It's in the
It may
call.
have been about something else, but it also can cover that because we have to follow the Constitution with regard to electors. We can't come up with some other system. And then finally, I would just say that when it says any law of the United States, there's both statutory and case law, so case law would be incorporated into this. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Wendy? Wendy?
Wendy Davis, Georgia. This K1B gives the chairperson of the DNC the opportunity to say someone isn't a bona fide Democrat, but where are we telling them how to transmit that information? Because again, in Georgia, our executive committee, basically if somebody sends a letter and asks to be on the ballot, we can accept those people. And it will be helpful to us to know if there's somebody who's running for president who the chair doesn't consider a bona fide candidate, because then we would, that would be a nice criteria for us to say, so they're not going to be on our ballot.
I'm trying to figure out if there's any history. Elaine, do you have any?
Oh, I don't have any background in this. I mean, you know, obviously this has been used. Well, I can tell you this, if this helps. The esteemed Chairman Fowler, okay, did in fact throw Lyndon LaRouche off the ballot in New Hampshire, correct? And the case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, yes, the party chairman has the right to do that. Interestingly enough, the party chairman in Wisconsin, who later became the governor, threw the white, who was the white supremacist from Louisiana? David Duke, threw David Duke off the Wisconsin Republican primary ballot. And the Supreme Court said that, yeah, that, or I don't know if the court said it, but it was fine, it was legal. So party chairman, I mean, this has been used, and party chairmen do use it to, you know, basically get rid of wackadoos. And that's bad actors, yeah. So I don't know if that answers the question, Wendy?
That tells me what it says here, which is helpful, but my question really was, how do I know that, like, do we need to say something in here that says the chair should share that determination with the state parties or something like that?
Well, usually the way it happens is that I think what they did in New Hampshire, and correct, Ray, you were around, right? I think what Don did in New Hampshire is technically we can't tell you not to be on the ballot if you've gotten on the ballot, but we can say that you will receive no delegates to the convention as a result of being on the ballot and winning. So that's the way we get into it, and it's very public. I mean, when this happens, it's a big deal. I don't know that you have to really tell anybody.
I think Jason had something he
I mean,
wanted
I
to
think
add to
the
it.
bishop and I want to clarify, I think this was language that she wrote in 2017, 2018. Like, this was very specific language after the 2016 presidential election around saying who is a Democrat and allowed on the Democratic ballot.
Yeah, we had no language before 2017 that
Can you
required.
put your speaker on?
I'm sorry.
Okay. We can't hear you.
I was saying that prior to 2017, our documents had no language that required our presidential candidates to be Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
So we added it in 2017 just to make that explicitly clear that if you want to be the Democratic presidential nominee, you should be a Democrat. Now, there was a lot of discussion around if there are folks where there's open registration, you're from a state where there's no party registration requirement, then how would you determine if someone was a Democrat? And that's why we left the chairperson discretion there to say, and all of this other language around public service and a record of accomplishment, et cetera, to allow for the possibility that someone is from a state where party registration is not required, and so you would not have a record that they are a registered Democrat, because that's not what their state allows. And Jason remembers more.
No, I remember that discussion. We had a lot of time in 2017, 2018.
Yeah.
After the Unity Reform Commission, it was part of the.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Bishop. Is there, Carol?
Before the 2008 primary in South Carolina, we had someone who wanted to be a favorite son candidate, and it was Stephen Colbert. I called in my state committee and said, you know, the other candidates, the real candidates are we don't use the word apeshit in formal meetings, but we've got to not put him on the ballot. And of course, Joe Sandler was our attorney then, and we were just on the phone with him all the time. And we ruled, and then I had to go on the show and say, you can't be on the South Carolina ballot. But we have since put in language in our delegate selection plan that this committee has always approved, specifying some rules about who can be our candidate. And one of them is you have to be running in more than one state. This committee has been flexible about allowing state parties to put some criteria in their own plans, because if you've had one bad experience, you want to not have another one.
Does this mean we can look you up on YouTube on the Colbert Show?
I don't know. I never thought of that. I almost
It was canceled, actually,
I did
I
it
think.
long distance. You know, I was not actually in the room with Stephen Colbert, but it was a terrible experience because all college students in America called me and wrote me letters telling me that I was going to burn in hell for keeping him off the ballot. It was awful. But
now you can come to Monroe, Michigan for his show.
but I did make Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton happy by keeping him off. So.
Raymond?
I just want to underscore the importance of this piece. As has been noted, it was silent prior to that. And we had a very real situation in 2015 when a group of Republicans decided to sue the state to keep a certain senator from a neighboring state off the ballot. And I didn't have anything to back me up in determining. And so I had to sort of create by saying that the DNC acknowledges that person as a senator enough to be a delegate to the National Convention, that the caucus, he's a member of the Democratic caucus. And so by making this much more clear, it would have made it a lot easier for me and all of the lawyers that were involved to be able to just quickly dispense with the challenge, which, as many of you might remember, received a lot of publicity.
You know, I don't know if we'll talk about this in the course of our upcoming meetings, but criteria for being part of the debates. And this language here, which we worked over a lot, might be very useful for criteria for being in the debates, and maybe allow us a little bit of room to get these debates down to, you know, sort of serious people, as opposed to people who want to sell books or, you know, get on television or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on Rule 13? Wendy, I think Sham he wants to answer your specific question.
Yeah, I think in the case of each state notifying the states of who isn't a bona fide Democratic candidate, like in the case of New Hampshire, there's going to be specific situations, and prescribing that and for a specific method isn't necessarily the most, it doesn't make the most sense in the rules, but that as situations come up, that will be communicated to whoever needs to know, whether it's by press release or someone calling the chair, and especially in states, I think in Georgia, you will determine ballot access by who is indeed a bona fide candidate. That's something that we would communicate if there's someone who, like, clearly, obviously, like, isn't, and also something that the team is able to support the DPG in.
Okay, so we can move on to Rule 14. Oh, Indira? Oh, she put it down, okay. Okay, so Will, would you like to go over Rule 14?
Thank you, Co-Chair. Rule 14 is on fair reflection of presidential preferences, requires proportional allocation of delegates based on voter preference, establishes a uniform 15% viability threshold, and sets detailed mathematical rules for allocating district-level delegates and at-large delegates.
So we will begin, I'm sorry, we will begin our discussion with Rule 14A. Is there, Frank?
Frank Leone from DC. I have suggested amendment to 14A, and the committee has, oh, and there it is. It would add at the end of the sentence there a statement that no ballot used for purposes of delegate selection shall permit voters to express more than one presidential preference. Where state law provides for multiple presidential preferences in a primary, only the first round will be considered for delegate allocation purposes. And this goes to the voting systems known as ranked choice voting or approval voting or other exotic voting methods. Ranked choice voting involves a voter having multiple votes for a candidate and ranking those votes 1 through 5 and then going through rounds until all the losing candidates are dismissed. The lowest candidate is dismissed and gets to the point that there's one candidate left. Now, personally, I'm not really a fan of ranked choice voting, but what this motion doesn't address ranked choice voting in general. There may be times when ranked choice voting is appropriate. And in fact, if we had a winner-take-all system where you had to reduce a field to one person, it might make sense. Where it doesn't make sense is in our delegate selection process. And there's been a national effort to get states to adopt ranked choice voting for presidential primaries as well as everything else. We discussed this issue 2 cycles ago. We discussed it last cycle, and that pressure is continuing. So I thought it made sense for this committee to go on record with its views on this process. And we can look at Maine as an example of the problems with the process. And this is, again, putting aside the question of whether it even makes sense or whether it really gives you a majority or whether it's confusing to voters or whether the counting is opaque. That's not the point. The point is there are really 2 provisions of the current Maine statute which cause problems. One is there is no 15% threshold. And this party went through a long process to come up with a 15% threshold that drew the line between candidates who were serious and should be taken seriously and those who were not. And under the ranked choice voting process, as suggested, it doesn't allow for that 15% threshold. So in the first vote, you might have less than 15%, but then on the second round, you might get elevated above 15%. So that's in direct violation of our delegate selection rules. The other thing that's a concern is in Maine, this rounds of voting continue until there are only 2 candidates, and 2 candidates get delegates. Well, under our system, up to 7 candidates can get delegates. Anybody who gets over 15% is eligible to get delegates. So it actually limits the voter's choice because of our proportional representation system. And that's why it doesn't make sense. So again, I could and I probably have talked at length about why I have a problem with ranked choice voting, but what we're talking about here is just, does it work with our process? And rather than just wait until state plans come up and tell them they can't do what state law tells them to do, I think it's helpful to provide guidance to states that say, you can have ranked choice voting for your Senate race and your governor's race and your congressional races. We're not opining on that at all. But for our presidential primary, the systems that you set up are in conflict with our delegate selection rules, and we can't approve states that use those processes. So I'd move the amendment.
And I second. Dennis.
Is there any discussion? I see Elaine and David.
Yeah, I just want to go on record saying that I like ranked choice voting. I think it's a very useful way to go about things in, however, winner-take-all systems. And we do not have a winner-take-all system for delegate selection in the Democratic Party. In fact, we have explicitly rejected that many years ago and continue to do so. So it simply doesn't fit our system. If we moved back and we allowed states to be winner-take-all, okay, then I think possibly this would work, because more and more people are getting familiar with it. But right now, if we're in this system with proportional representation, which is outlined in Rule 14, I just don't think it works. And remember that one of the reasons we have all these rules to begin with is that in conventions prior to the 1972 and before, there were just one credentials challenge after another, one fight after another. Some of them in '68 were actual fights on the floor of the convention. And we do this to reduce the number of credentials challenges, because if you play by these rules, then you can't be challenged. And so you trying to graft ranked choice voting onto the proportional representation guarantees one challenge after another. And I think we have better ways to spend our time. And so I support this motion, or this amendment.
Thank you. Steph? I'm sorry, David.
Thank you, David. Excuse me, David McDonald, Washington. I do have some comments opposed to the amendment substance, but before I get to them, I want to either clarify or suggest some changes to the proposed language. As written, it says no ballot used for the purposes of delegate selection shall permit voters, but I think what you're really talking about is no ballot used for the allocation of delegates among preferences. And there's a distinct difference because states have proposed and we have approved using ranked choice voting in the process of selecting which delegates fill their slots. So I would hope that you'll make an amendment to change that to no ballot used for the purposes of allocating delegates among preferences shall permit voters to express.
Sorry, David, can you say that a little slower for me?
Frank?
No ballot used for purposes of apportioning delegates or allocating delegates among presidential preferences shall permit voters to express more than one presidential preference. I think that's what you're driving at, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I'm not a big fan of it for other purposes too, but for the moment, I'll go along with that. I think it should be allocation rather than apportionment.
Yeah, I think that's probably right, yeah. I get those two words confused. And then,
Sorry, just, does the language look right on the screen? And I'll remove the word delegate selection, but it's that.
I guess delete delegate selection.
yeah.
Yeah.
The words, yeah. And then in the last sentence, in the unusual circumstance where a state law mandates use of a caucus, which could come up in Iowa, as written, that would say that in a caucus state mandated by state law, you could not have a realignment or second allocation. And again, I don't quite think that's what was intended. I think as to which of those two rounds of ballots in a precinct caucus situation is the one that's to be used.
Well, it does say,
It says
it does say in a primary.
primary, yep.
Okay, all right.
And Iowa, by the way, seems to have forsworn the second rounds anyway, and
Yep.
that's probably a smart thing to do. But I think as written, I think it doesn't specifically address caucuses.
Okay. Yeah. Those were my clarifications. Then in general, and like Frank, I've spoken on the subject in prior meetings, and I'm not going to beat the issue to death. If there are people who haven't spoken before who want to speak on it, that's fine. But I have not. I just don't think this is the time and the place to say we're going to ban states from trying things. That if a state legislature passes something, we want to have a confrontation rather than deal with finding a problem with their implementation when the plan comes in or something, but just blanket say, we don't care what you come up with. We don't care what your argument is. We don't care if your voters pass it by initiative. We don't care if the legislature did it 75-25. We're going to have a fight with you, and we're going to take away your delegates. We're going to create a credentials challenge, and we're going to have it in maybe the worst possible time, which is in a contested convention. You know, we have dealt with it on an ad hoc basis. I realize it's irritation to talk about it, but, you know, you have to think about what happens when you flat out say something can't be done. What are you inviting, as opposed to it needs to be approved, or, you know, we may object to it, or something that slows it down. And that is my principal concern with this. I think there are places where ranked choice voting should be used, places where it shouldn't. I think there may be other alternatives that a legislature might want to use more than one preference on a ballot that are not really ranked choice voting, but are giving people a second choice in early voting, and this flatly prohibits everything. And I think that's a bad idea, but I really don't want to redo my own previous comments. As I said, if there are other people who want to say something, that's fine, but I'm not going to take up the committee's time saying the same thing I've said in prior sessions.
Steph?
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Stephanie Campagna in New Jersey. To David's point, I am very against a ban on ranked choice voting. I grew up with MySpace. I'm very used to ranking my friends, big fan of it. But what I see as this is a ban is not what the Democratic Party is about. We are the ones that stick up for people's rights to choose, people deciding what is right for their states at a time when we are investing in state party infrastructure and saying states know better how to run elections, how to do the work in their states. I think that we need to be able to trust the states to say, this is what we want to do. And in addition to that, if we're banning ranked choice voting in states and DC that requires it for the presidential, that is disenfranchising voters who actively selected to participate in ranked choice voting for these contests. It is not a mandate from God. Nobody is saying that you absolutely have to do RCV, but the voters that opt in should have their voices heard. And I urge everyone to vote against this. Thank you so much.
Andre T.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Andre Schreiber from Texas. I'm opposed to this amendment. I do support ranked choice voting for a large variety of reasons, which I won't enumerate for this committee because I know we've all heard the arguments. But in my mind, ranked choice voting and other forms of approval voting have met that burden of proof, showing that I think they're better than first past the post voting for a variety of reasons. But in particular, I do not like a ban here. I would be supportive of us coming up with some language to provide guidance or guardrails, because I do believe some of the concerns about implementation are fair. There's all sorts of ways you could go about that. You could say, for instance, to fit it within our proportional representation system, that you only eliminate bottom vote getting candidates until everyone has at least 15%, in which case you can still then be awarding 3, 4, 5 candidates, delegates. There's a variety of ways to do it, but I think there's a pretty strong movement within a lot of the grassroots of our party in a lot of places that are supportive of ranked choice voting. We've seen more and more states adopt it. My own personal state party, we've adopted it basically every single place that we're able to. In the city I live, Austin, which we're looking forward to having y'all, we adopted it, and then the Republican legislature immediately came and preempted that. So I am not a fan of replicating what happened to me where I live from the national level down to the states that do have this. Again, as I said, I'm extremely open to guardrails, but I think a flat-out ban, especially when there are people that care so much about this voting system and have been able to speak so eloquently about how beneficial it has been for them, looking to those states that have implemented it, or another recent example, the New York City mayoral election. I think there's a lot of positivity that comes out about that, especially when it has come to building coalitions between candidates that have less animosity. And that's a big thing for me that I would not like to see taken away. So I am in opposition to this amendment. I hope we can find some way to allow states to use ranked choice voting that is otherwise congruent and works with the rest of our rules, but a blanket ban is simply, I think, moving backwards for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael?
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Michael Kappen, I represent California. Ranked choice voting has been used in my state for over 20 years. In a 2024 poll across San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley, and San Leandro, 70% of voters said that they want to keep using ranked choice voting. Redondo Beach, the first city in LA County, just used it for the first time last year. My constituents support ranked choice voting, and a lot of them do. But at its core, this isn't about ranked choice voting. My deeper concern is about this body's overreach, or potential overreach. Voters in Alaska, Maine, Wyoming didn't ask us for permission to use ranked choice voting, and they shouldn't have to. Alaskans voted for it. Maine's legislature passed it. To sit here and tell these state parties that they can't use a system their own voters chose, that's not party rule. That's a veto over the democratic will of millions of people. I can support narrow language that says states may use ranked choice voting if their law allows it. What I can't support is this body substituting its judgment for the judgment of voters who already decided this question at the ballot box. We're not the party that's in the business of banning things, especially when the folks most affected are not in this room. Banning things that our own voters like, while the Heritage Foundation and Project 2025 sponsors are pushing that same exact ban, that's not a message that I can carry back home. The RBC should set guardrails, not pull the brake on reforms that are working in those states. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Jamie?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm speaking, Jamie Selzler, North Dakota. I'm speaking in opposition to the amendment. As Democrats, we obviously have concerns about the federal government telling states how to conduct elections. We have extreme concerns about it, and I think as a party, we should not be saying what they're doing is bad, but when we do it, it's okay by telling you how to conduct your elections. It is fair for us to determine rules for how do you allocate delegates based on the results of an election. How do you choose who those delegates are based on the allocation that you've come up with? But to substitute our judgment and tell states that we know better than you how to conduct elections is not in line with what we say we believe when it comes to the federal government. We should allow states to have local control about how they do this. That's especially relevant for state parties or for state law. Fair for us to give some guidelines, to put some boundaries to ensure that that people's rights are being respected, but we shouldn't just step in and say, we're not going to let you do what you think is best for how you conduct your own elections. So I'm voting in opposition to it.
Thank you. Leah?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Leah Daughtry from New York. I'm a little confused because I thought I was not reading this as a ban on ranked choice voting. And I think Frank specifically said, how you do your Senate races, your House races, whatever else you're doing, do it. But for the purposes of delegate selection, for the purposes of the presidential candidate race, which is what we administer, the allocation of delegates is what this Rules and Bylaws Committee, one of our major responsibilities. I thought we were narrowly talking about that. And so for the purposes of that and saying, when it comes to the process that we got to deal with in this party, in this committee, we don't want ranked choice voting. I think that's what I understood. And if you want to have it for all your down ballot races, go right ahead. That's not a problem. Do what you want to do. But we're dealing with thresholds, we're dealing with percentages, we're dealing with who gets what candidate gets what delegates, and the ability to know that result in a timely fashion has an impact on the rest of the race. And on subsequent races, you gotta know who won in state A. That impacts what the candidate does in state B, which may be the next day, and uncertainty. And I'm from New York City, where we had ranked choice voting this last election. And I will spare you my philosophical challenges with how we do ranked choice voting in New York. That's another conversation for another time. But the recalculation and the revoting and the retallying and all of that does not lead to a result that is known when in a presidential calendar, you need to know as a candidate, did I win or did I not win? How many delegates do I have? Because in the end, it's all about the delegate math. And who winds up being the nominee is delegate math. And so knowing with certainty, by time certain, what I got and what I didn't get, I don't want to go to bed thinking I won, and then the next day, and we saw a little bit of that last time, wake up the next day and I'm third. It's a challenge, but again, I understand everybody's concern about what states vote on and all, and I want to be clear, and I want Frank to affirm that we're not talking about what you do with your Senate race in Alaska and Maine and all these, and what you do with your House races or your mayoral race or whatever other race. You want ranked choice vote, and that's what your people vote, fine. But for this narrow, top of the ticket process that Rules and Bylaws has to administer, and enforce, at that level, we need there to be one ballot. And the results of that one ballot be what stands. Frank, did I understand you?
Yes, that's correct. And the reason why I brought this up is because there are advocacy groups who believe ranked choice voting is the answer to everything, and including our process. And it doesn't work with our process, and that's the narrow issue that I'm talking about. And that is that's what we do here. We tell states how to run their delegate selection processes within a framework that we all agree to and that's approved by the DNC. That's our job. But yes, I agree with everything Bishop said.
Wendy?
Thank you, Wendy Davis, Georgia. I happen to be a fan of ranked choice voting and how it does bring people together, and a lot of good things that the folks who are advocating for it think it does. But using the language we've been using in this room, the delegate math, we do not have a first past the post situation with our delegate math. We have proportional representation with our delegate math. And to me, every place where I've seen ranked choice voting utilized, it's about getting to a majority vote. We aren't a winner-take-all states anymore. It's all proportional representation. As we've said several times, there is the opportunity in some states for 5, 6, 7 candidates to achieve delegates in that state. And so I think that I support this amendment. Thank you.
Alicia?
Thank you. Alicia Andrews from Oklahoma. I'm sitting here listening to this, and it feels like we've devolved into a proxy argument about ranked choice voting versus what we are in this room to do. I am not going to speak for or against ranked choice voting in principle, because I don't think that that's what we're here to do. I've heard people say who are in opposition to this that they are good for guardrails, but they're not good for banning ranked choice voting. And as I read this, this is a guardrail that helps us do what it is that we are trying to do. It does not go into California or New York or Maine and say, you can't do ranked choice voting. What it says is, for this process, we have to make a decision, and here is how we will make that decision. That's how I read it. As worded, I think I would be voting for the language.
Thank you. Steph?
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Steph Campagna in New Jersey. Something I do want to address is, to me, that this is effectively a ban on ranked choice voting, not just because that's what it reads like, but it's also because it creates a lot of issues with voter confusion and voter education. It increases the cost if states like Maine and Alaska and any other state that chooses to do ranked choice voting, including DC for the presidential primary, they have spent all of this time and energy explaining how to do ranked choice voting, and then turning around and saying, oh, just kidding, don't do that. It creates a lot more bad will at a time when the Democratic Party truly cannot afford that, and we want to be open and honest with our voters, and I think that it does create a lot more complications. Another thing that I do want to flag is that I do believe that it is still the standard for overseas voters, not the Democrats abroad, but military voters, I believe, do have the right to do instant runoff on their ballots. So would that change their right to do that? Yeah, some military voters, like overseas, it's like you can select your second preference on the same ballot. It's something that they do in the South for instant runoff. I'm not sure if it's still applicable, but I am asking the question there.
I don't have the answer to that, but I think Helen said, do you have an answer? Did you?
In primary elections held by the states, where the state requires the candidate to get a majority and therefore provides for a runoff 2 weeks later, those ballots offer instant runoff. I can't tell you off the top of my head whether they simply offer a second spot on which to vote, or whether it's using ranked choice voting. In my state, what is offered is our primary is, I think, on the 9th. We have a majority requirement. That ballot that went overseas also has a spot to vote again on the 23rd. And you can vote for the same person on the 23rd or a different person on the 23rd. So for South Carolina's version of the military ballot, it is not ranked choice. Other states may have a different mechanism. We just offer the second vote.
But that vote doesn't count unless there's a runoff.
Yeah, it doesn't get counted unless there's a runoff in that race.
Got it. Barry?
I am in favor of Frank's motion for a lot of reasons that have already been here, and I'm doing this as a, agreeing to it, even though it's against my personal interest as a litigator, because I'd like to have so many more lawsuits happen as a result of this. And as Elaine said, we're eliminating that possibility. So, it's painful to me. But I believe, Wendy also, stated around what we're trying to do is not reach that majority, but get the delegate math. To me, the timely reporting, candidates want it's like an instant lottery ticket. They want to know, move on to the next state. Our primary season is not that big. If you start doing this and all of a sudden other states say, let's do this too, we're not having results very quickly, and I think that's totally opposite what we need. I know we said out there, this is our job regarding delegate selection, and it's not our job to deal with it for the Senate and the House and every state race and if they all want it. It's one piece that's pulled out for presidential primaries to make it right. And I just strongly believe that this is our job. And, it's not necessarily, apples to apples, but there's plenty of rules that we have. We know with Alabama, you can't do this. And it's the same kind of thing. We want to make sure that our rules are followed, and I don't think it's disenfranchising anyone. Everyone has the right to vote. Everyone has the right to pick and choose, and I think that the motion should pass.
Thank you. Michael? Thank you, Barry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Michael Capp, California. This is a ban on ranked choice voting for states that already require it for their presidential primary. It's state law in both Maine and DC that they must use ranked choice voting in their presidential primary. I'm also deeply uncomfortable having this conversation with the ASCC president not here and without proper notice to those states most impacted by this proposed ban of ranked choice voting. There are a lot of stakeholders who should have the opportunity to be consulted and voice their perspective to this committee. And I want to hear from them before we move any further. We're now past noon, and I thought we were ending this meeting at noon. So I'd like to make a motion to table this discussion to a future meeting after we receive appropriate input.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor to table. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. I think we're going to need to do a quick count. Can you raise your hand for aye?
Sorry.
And the proxies. And Sean, restate.
I'm sorry. So, Michael, the motion on the floor is to table until a later date?
Just like we've done with numerous provisions previously. Correct.
Yo. We can. None.
It's not a debatable motion.
Okay, so those for tabling, raise your hand, please. Postponing, rather.
Are we putting up two hands if we have a proxy?
Yes. we haven't gotten to that yet. The other. Is with the other, to move forward, right?
You're right, it would be 23.
Okay, can you raise your hand for moving forward?
Did you see?
Who has James Proxy? Yes. The Jim Proxy for,
Stewart has David, Delegate Dave's proxy.
do you have David's proxy? Okay, you got two. Can we count moving forward again, please? Yeah, not tabling, yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. Me and Jim should vote. Yeah.
Donna, you have April's proxy.
Yep. And I'm voting.
And then you're four.
I'm voting.
Yeah.
Twen-
Four to move.
Mhm.
Continue. Okay.
That's-
And then you have Jim's proxy.
Okay, I have Jim, so I got two.
Yeah.
Okay,
So that's 24 to 22.
so we're moving forward. Okay, vote is 24 to 22. We're going to move forward. Yeah. Keep the discussion going, 24 to 22, yes.
Did the co-chairs vote or not?
We voted
So you voted
to move forward. Yes, correct. Mhm. Michael, I think you had, so Luis, we're going to continue with the discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As a lifelong disenfranchised voter from Puerto Rico, that word carries a lot of meaning to me. And quite frankly, I don't have a firm position as to ranked choice voting, but I do have concerns. I remember Frank was mentioning how in the first round a candidate could get less than 15%, but perhaps in a second round would be higher than 50%, but it could also go the other way around. A candidate could have 20% in the first round and then fall below the threshold in the second round. Then, so aren't we disenfranchising those delegates? That's a question that I have regarding using this procedure for allocation of delegates. And then I also have another question, and I think it's not clear to me how states that actually have this in their laws, how does it work? Because if we are going to, according to this amendment, if we're only going to allocate delegates according to the first round, then how does the messaging work out there? Because we could end up in a situation where a candidate may place fourth in a first round result, but that end up winning the whole thing if that's how the state carries the primary. How does that affect the race? Who is declared a winner? We're talking about early states or Super Tuesday. I mean, how does that? Who is the winner of that primary? That is not clear to me, and I do believe that ranked choice vote does work when you're considering a winner-take-all contest. But if we're going to continue with our threshold section, then it's not applicable. It's inconsistent. So either we change the threshold and we take it back to winner-take-all, which I don't think that's what we're trying to do here, or we approve this amendment. Now, I don't have a position at the moment. That's why I wanted to table this, just to have more discussion, but that, the body thought different. But that's my question, right? How does this work where a state moves forward with the ranked choice voting primary, and we then say we're just going to allocate delegates according to the first round. Wouldn't that be or affect the race and the actual result of what comes out of that state? That's my question.
Okay, I think Frank wanted to speak to that. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, thank you. That's a fair question. I mean, the reason why, again, I've proposed this is to head off other states who think that they can just come up with a system and we'll go along with it because we can't. Maine is the only state that has it in the presidential race. And as I indicated, they provide that they don't recognize a 15% threshold, and they keep calculating until there are two winners. The top two vote getters are the only people who get delegates under the Maine system. So this committee will be faced with the question, do we accept that and give them an exception from our rules so where everybody else has a 15% threshold and they don't, everybody else gets delegates if they're over 15%, but in Maine, only two candidates get delegates? Or do we do this solution and basically say, look, Maine, you're going to let your voters vote, and the first round is the only one that we're going to consider because that's consistent with our rules. Our rules trump their state statutes, and they shouldn't be, I want to word this appropriately, they shouldn't be trying to involve themselves in the details of our delegate selection process and suggest solutions and approaches which are completely inconsistent with our delegate selection plan. So that's why I am bringing this up now. Is right now we're only dealing with one state. Alaska doesn't do it in the presidential race. Redondo Beach doesn't do it in the presidential race. Everybody who's doing ranked choice voting can continue to do it, except for when it comes to our delegate selection process, the state law has to be consistent with our rules, or else our rules govern. But that's a fair question. I hope I answered it.
Jason?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to start by saying that I'm not opposed to ranked choice voting as a general matter, and I understand why many people support it, and I really respect the goals behind it. But I think in this specific process, we're not debating whether ranked choice voting is good or bad. We're deciding how the Democratic Party allocates delegates to our national convention. And for that purpose, I believe the clearest and fairest standard that we have is that voters first express presidential preferences, which we have in this language here, which is why I support this language. I don't think it, in my opinion, I don't think this language bans ranked choice voting. It doesn't tell a state necessarily how it has to conduct an election. What it simply says is that second line there, that when we're allocating delegates under our rules, only that first round vote is going to be used. And I think that really matters because our delegate allocation system really depends on consistency, proportionality, and transparency. We have viability thresholds. We have proportional allocation. And I think we have rules that need to be applied evenly across every single state and territory. Using that first preference gives voters, campaigns, state parties, and this committee a clear and audible and understandable number. It ensures that voters in one state are not treated any differently from voters in another because of how later rounds of tabulation may operate. So again, this isn't a statement against ranked choice voting. It's a practical rule for a very specific purpose, allocating Democratic delegates in a way that fairly reflects presidential preference. And for that reason, I support the language that Frank has introduced here.
I just have a question. For those of you, and I don't have an opinion about ranked choice voting yet either, because I don't know enough. And I wanna understand, I wanna see states where it's actually been implemented and how it works. And for example, to see how that would translate to my state of Maryland. So I don't wanna make a blanket decision about something that I truly don't know and don't understand. But what I do wanna know is from you, based on what you know, how would this work in a presidential primary? Take a state and tell me how it would work. Explain it to me like I'm 5. And how, if we're going to do proportional, for example, explain to me how it works. If one of you, just help me know.
Well, we'll get to that question unless someone from the ranked choice side want to answer it right quick. Michael or Gary?
Well, I wanted to suggest
that it depends upon how it's actually written. You know, you can do it multiple ways, and the way that I was conceiving that this would take place if a state were to do it, and by the way, I think it's not just Maine, I thought I heard that DC also requires it, but anyway. What you could do is write a system so that it locks in the people who received over 15%, and you're only talking about the people under, and when you redistribute those, does perhaps one of those candidates happen to come up to the 15%? That's the way I would conceive of it anyway, but I suppose there are multiple ways of doing it.
And that's where that's what causes me some confusion, because if there are multiple ways to do it, and there's no one size fits all, I'm wondering, what does that do to the counting, to the, you know, to the recording at the end of the night when, as we've said over and over again, people want to know right away what the results are. So if we've locked in this group, but then we've got this group that we still have to account for. And that's why I said I don't have an opinion one way or the other. I'm asking to be educated. And already I'm just wondering what that's going to do to my state of Maryland, never having done this before. And we're talking about implementing this in the upcoming cycle, not skipping a cycle, where we can have time to educate people and get people prepared, but like in a minute. And so that's why I'm asking the question.
And I would just add that, which I wanted to say before, was that I would want to do guardrails, as Mr. Triber has suggested, so that there is some, you know, consistency about how it is done if a state wants to do it.
Michael Capp from California, I definitely hear you about the need to and want to be educated. That was, maybe I wasn't clear, that was my purpose of my motion to table, so we can have time, bring in the folks from these states, from Maine and DC, where it is required by their state law to hold ranked choice voting for the presidential primary, so we can hear directly from them, as well as others, what this could look like. I think we're moving too fast, and I think you just made my point.
Exactly. So, Michael, but I guess my question is, and they've actually done this before, or are they planning to do it?
I'm not here to purport to speak for them, which is why I think they need to be here in the room. And they were not told to be here, so they're not here. So that's why.
So we don't have any.
We're going to move the discussion on.
Okay.
We don't have representatives here.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
can I just note, this is not the first time we've discussed this. We discussed it in the last cycle as well, but we did not do it, and so we're back to add more specificity. There's no shock to anybody that this has been an ongoing discussion since at least the last, I don't even know what year it is anymore, at least 2 cycles. And so we keep punting the ball on providing specificity, but this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that we've been discussing, because we've been discussing it for the last 8 years at least.
Well, and I just want to add, we notified the full DNC membership of this meeting. We've been working our way through each rule consistently, one by one, and they knew, like, individuals knew this was happening. We received outreach from some of those state parties. I think we need to continue this conversation and settle this, vote on this, and continue moving forward today so we can continue getting rules done.
If we can finish our discussion. Alicia?
Thank you. This is a very heated conversation, and I am sensitive to the folks in the room who feel like this is a ban, and that is not the message that we want to send. I'm wondering if it might be useful for us to move on with the conversation for the folks who feel like it's a ban to propose alternate language for us to consider that would, I think, educate us, because I'm not seeing this as a ban, but they feel very strongly about it. Maybe they should offer alternate language so that we can kind of get off the dime.
Okay. David?
David McDonald, Washington. Consistent with my earlier statement that I was not going to repeat things I'd said to the committee before, and I'm not advocating one way or the other for ranked choice voting in context of this amendment. I do want to draw everybody's attention to the potential side effects of this amendment. Maine has a statute. Maine has a statute that says that they will keep counting. We have a rule, 14H, that says the non-binding portion of a presidential primary is not a step in the delegate selection process and is considered detrimental. State parties must take steps to educate the public that a non-binding presidential preference event is meaningless, and state parties and presidential candidates should take all steps possible not to participate. If Maine says it's going to keep counting, but if we just want to use the first round, that's up to the party, but Maine is going to keep counting and publish the results, 14H requires the Maine party to say, nobody campaign in Maine, presidential candidates stay out of Maine, because it's got this straw contest. It's one of the reasons I think a ban is a problem as opposed to trying to address this when it comes up. If another state says, our state, we don't want to change our counting mechanisms for you. We'll give you the results of all the rounds. You decide, stop at the first round. That's your business. But we're going to publish the rest. Then we have to deal with 14H and the affirmative requirement that presidential candidates be urged not to participate in some of these states. Just doing a flat-out ban, creates all these risks of confrontation or confusion that are different than the risk when you're talking about what's the specific implementation. And that's why I oppose this amendment, irrespective of where you stand on ranked choice voting. I know there are lots of flavors and other things. It's got benefits, it's got negatives, it's confusing, it's this, that. We've heard all that, but a flat-out ban is convenient. It lets everybody go home and think we're never going to talk about this again, but I don't think that's the reality. And I think the next time we talk about it could be in a much messier situation. And I would vote against it, but yeah, I've said my piece. I'll move on.
Joanne?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, Joanne Dowdell, New Hampshire. I am confused, I will admit that, about ranked choice voting. So my question is, what is the harm if this language is not included? What problem did we have, or is this in anticipation of a problem?
I think we heard the bishop recount the last 2 cycles of this being discussed, and there had been no resolution to ranked choice voting or not. And I think it was our member, Frank, who decided to offer some language. And we have not voted on that language yet, so I think everybody has had the opportunity to provide their input to ranked choice voting. And it is, as we can see, a very robust conversation, but it is not like this conversation is going away. I applaud Frank for at least attempting to get us to a resolution. And I hear some of the language banned and all of this, but I specifically, and I will, before we vote on this, I will ask this for this rule to be read again so that people can understand and be clear about the language in which they are passing or not passing. But this conversation has to come to some conclusion. The plane has to land somewhere.
I completely understand, and I actually agree with that. And I have been part of many of those discussions in the past. But I guess my question is, if this language is solving for something that happened, and this is our remedy for that, as opposed to, is this anticipating what could occur?
I will ask the author to speak to that.
Thank you. It's a fair question. The answer is both. 4 years ago, we looked at Maine. Maine said, we want to ignore your threshold that's been in your rules for 30 years, and we were going to go and count, so only the top 2 candidates get delegates. Then what happened was there was only one candidate. He got over 50%, so the ranked choice didn't apply. But Maine is one state where we will have to deal with that issue, and this suggested solution of dealing with that issue, and that is just counting the first pass only, the first round only. And I disagree with my good friend David. I don't think that makes the whole thing a beauty contest or a straw poll. The first count is effective. The other counts are not, and so state parties should tell people when the State Board of Elections says that only 2 candidates got delegates, they're wrong. The party's process of allocating delegates according to the first round applies. Then the second question, are we also trying to plan ahead? Yes, because I think many state legislators don't understand the details of our delegate selection process. And it's an effort to get out ahead of it and let states know that that again, you can do ranked choice voting for dog catcher or whatever, but this doesn't fit with our system, and it's going to create a problem with getting your state delegate selection plan accepted by the DNC. And this provides notice in advance, given the efforts to get state legislatures to adopt similar bills. So the answer to the question is both. It addresses how to deal with a state like Maine, and it tries to discourage states like Maine so we don't have to deal with them in the future.
Steph Waitin from New Jersey. For what it's worth, I do have language that would provide the guardrails. I just wasn't sure of the appropriate time to bring it up. It is very extensive, and I'd be happy to send that to Party Affairs, but it would take a long time to go through. I'd be happy to. I'll send it over to you, Sean, but it is long, so I do think tabling might still be in our best interest.
Well, that was voted down. Carol?
Thank you. A couple of things. When we get to 14H, perhaps we should make clear that 14H applies to straw polls and not to what we're talking about today. I wish that my state had ranked choice voting instead of runoffs in our legislative elections, our county council elections, our statewide elections. It would make everybody's life easier if we had that. But in this context, the real thing I want to say is I've heard a couple of people say that we're trying to disenfranchise voters in places where they use ranked choice voting. Disenfranchise is a really strong word in the southern states. We're not disenfranchising anybody whose state normally uses ranked choice voting. You still get 1 vote. That's all I get in my state without ranked choice voting. 1 vote in the delegate selection process. And you know, disenfranchise. We used to do that to people, but we're not doing that here. We're giving you just what every other state has, 1 vote in a presidential primary. So let's don't use that word again, but it just seems to me that this election, this language it doesn't ban anything. It just says we're only counting the first ballot, and you're only counting my first ballot. Thank you.
Donna?
I just want to clarify for this conversation that DC residents voted overwhelmingly in a presidential year in November 24 to allow ranked choice voting. This is the first election where ranked choice voting will be conducted. Initiative 83, which essentially opens up our primary to independents and others, is the first time that we've had this system in place. So I don't know how much we can learn from it until we're in the process of going through it. But I do know that the DC Democratic Party and most of the DC Democratic officials opposed it. I don't want to get into the weeds of all of the machinations back and forth. The DC Council, as you all know, by law had to submit it. Congress reviewed it. Congress did not oppose it. So as of March of last year, it is to be implemented in this first ever election, where we have an open mayoral seat, an open seat for delegate or member of Congress, and this is the first of its kind in Washington DC, and I'll allow Mr. Wilson and others from the DC Democratic Party at some point to give you the results after we've had our election in a couple of weeks.
Okay, so it appears that Donna is the last person. I'm sorry. Artie?
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Artie Blanco, Nevada. I think we have heard from members of this committee, Bishop Daughtry, Ms. Fowler, and others that have really pinpointed key reasons why we need and we should move forward with this language that Mr. Leon has presented to this committee. This has been a discussion for at least 2 cycles that I've been a member of the RBC. And we've continued to punt and punt. And the more I hear this, I'm not sure if it's really about the voters at times. That's how, challenging it is to be in this discussion here. But I appreciate that we're having this discussion. And I am appreciating that new members of this committee are now able to voice their positions as well. So I appreciate that. And we've had the time. For me, as someone from Nevada, we Nevadans have made this decision for us in our state. But we have a lot of work to do. This is about our presidential primary nominating process, delegate selection process. We need to move forward because we have a lot of work to do, to continue to do on this committee. When others, some of us, we feel we've got we're gonna have conference calls, online calls, Zoom calls for meetings. We're gonna have 2 more meetings in June and in July. We know we have a lot of work. I feel that now is the time to just pass this motion so that we can then move forward and be ready for the rest of this process. We have to keep our eyes on the prize, which is the general election of 2028, and how we are setting ourselves up for success as a party in our nominating process that we set as a committee. So, thank you.
Thank you, Artie. Seeing no further discussion, we're going to move. Oh, Gary?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The chair had solicited alternative language, and it has been given to staff. And I think that to be fully informed on a vote for this, that we should see the alternative language first. Thank you.
Did you guys get the language? And what would be?
Yeah. Who do I share it with? Who do I share it with?
Give us a second. They're trying to work out the technical. But we still have a motion that is on the floor that we're going to move to vote on, even with seeing the language, because it was not in addition to or a replacement of. So we'll go ahead and vote on 14A. All those in favor?
Madam Chair, just a clarification. So are you asking, because nobody made a motion for Stephanie's language that she submitted, that we're moving forward, but to support, to put the motion on, wouldn't we have to see it? Is there a reason why we just can't pause for a second?
Did you want to make a motion? Was it a motion, or you just wanted to, you submitted language, you did not clarify? Okay. We're gonna.
Yeah.
So is this a?
Yeah, but
what's the procedure?
point of clarification, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Give
us a second, Andre.
Okay.
Just give us 1 second.
She submitted something. I've never seen it.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether it's an addition to this.
Yeah, we don't know.
Substitute.
Yeah.
For this, and she would need to tell us that.
So.
There's no language in here that changes 14A.
Oh, so Steph, since Well, we're working on getting the language up. Is this a substitute? Is this in addition to? What exactly does your language, because we have not seen it, so.
It's a motion to substitute, Madam Chair.
It's a substitute?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, if the motion is to amend 14A and this is to amend 14B instead, is that a?
Oh, so she's on 14B. Well, okay, this is 14B, this is not even 14A.
I think it's still in spirit of the rule, like it's still part of it. So I think that it would be to substitute so that it's not the first part, it would be clarification for this, like for the rest of the
We have
rule.
to vote on the first one.
I did say it was very long. I did warn everyone.
Say that again? Why don't you just say it out loud? You can just. Give us a second,
Yes, ma'am.
Stephanie.
There should be more. It goes into D, steps 1 and 2, and then E as well. But wait, there's more.
Helen's going to give a parliamentary procedure on this, on how we're going to move forward.
The discussion with the chair is as follows. You have a pending amendment which has been discussed to 14A. You have a proposed amendment which we assume, based on the discussion, would get a second, okay? So the determination of the chair is that if the proposed amendment to A is adopted, then the proposed amendment currently showing on the screen would be out of order because it's completely inconsistent with the adoption of A. If A is rejected, then you would have an opportunity to consider what is on the screen.
May I have a point of, I guess it's either information or inquiry, but given that the chair's ruling would be that if Frank's amendment passes, the language that Stephanie submitted would be out of order, is it still the case that someone who votes in favor of Frank's amendment could later move to reconsider that vote in order to allow Stephanie's amendment to be considered at the next session or meeting.
Excuse my smile, but as you know, that's what I refer to as the Robert Dole rule in the United States Senate, where when his folk were missing, he voted with the majority in order, and he did it on a regular basis, in order to move to reconsider the next day.
And it is permissible.
We're going to move to vote on Rule 14A as submitted by Frank Leon.
Sorry, can we switch back to the delegate selection rules on the screen share?
A. So we will have Sham reread this so people are clear. 14A.
Let me scroll up. So the amendment is to add the language, "No ballot used for purposes of allocation of delegates among presidential preference shall permit voters to express more than one presidential preference. Where state law provides for multiple presidential preferences in a primary, only the first round will be considered for delegate allocation purposes."
All those in favor of Rule 14A, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Nay. It appears the ayes have it, but if we want to be clear, we can ask everyone that said aye to raise their hands, and we can count. So we have 28 nays. Oops. 28 to 50. It looks like the ayes have it for 14A.
Madam Chair, before you move on, to avoid confusion, since I raised my hand in both instances, my proxy voted one way and I voted the other. We are on both sides of the issue, and if necessary, to make a motion for reconsideration, we're eligible on either side.
Very honest of him. Very nice. Yeah.
Madam Chair, what was the total, please, again? The total vote.
I'm sorry, 28 yes and 14 nay.
David, it was your vote, though, that prevailed, was on the prevailing side? Yeah. But for
Best meeting of my life, I actually won one, you know, it doesn't matter which one.
He went either way. It's called a win-win.
We're going to move to 14B. Gary?
Gary Shea, California. I had a minor amendment to this one, and it's about the last sentence. I would like to change that last sentence so that it reads, in accordance with Section F, comma, states shall have a threshold of 15%. Instead of this not greater than, not less than, you know, consolidate the language.
Is there a second?
And I gave that language to Sham earlier.
Okay. Any discussion around that? Hearing no discussion. Accept it. 14C. I'm sorry, okay. Wendy?
I apologize. So B is, to my recollection, the first instance, we've talked about the 15% threshold, just for,
I'm talking about it quite a bit today.
I mean, is this a, but would this be the place for us to discuss whether we wanted to maintain a 15% rule or potentially lower the threshold since there are going to be so many candidates?
Is that a motion or is that a discussion?
It's a
Are you just making a
discussion.
point?
I'm
Okay.
asking for us to, sure, parliamentary inquiry then.
Yeah. Does anybody want
With
to
this-
discuss the history of the 15% threshold?
I mean, it seems pretty high to me when we're gonna, the early states will have.
No, she just wants to discuss.
I can talk a little bit about that. I mean, we've had thresholds as high as 25% at some point. There was a lot of support for 20% threshold, which I personally would favor, a slightly higher threshold. Here's the problem I see with the 15% threshold. I want to go right to the content of this. There are many delegate districts that have only 3 delegates, okay, or 4 delegates. That's because there's a lot of congressional districts that are Republican districts, and they just never, they just don't have enough of a Democratic vote to get a lot of delegates. And in those districts, nobody with 16% ever gets a delegate. So we have this idea that somehow if you get 15%, you're going to get a delegate. It just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen mathematically unless you're maybe in the handful of districts that get 9 delegates, and those are almost all majority-minority districts, which, thank you, Republican Party, they've now busted up. So the illusion of a 15% is, it is just an illusion. It just never happens. So I think it is much more realistic to move it to, say, a 20% threshold, particularly when we're looking at races that there's going to be just a ton of candidates. And so I like this. It has always been argued that this would be greater inclusion, right? And that was the rationale for 15%. The problem is that nobody ever gets included under a 15% in a multi-candidate race anyway. No, it doesn't even work out at large, but at the district level, it really doesn't work out. Yeah. So I would love to see a 20% threshold. I think of all the years when we should do it, this is the time. So I thank you for bringing it up.
I'm sorry, we can move on to C? Yes. No. No, because she wanted to discuss. Yes, no motion.
For section C, there isn't a change. C used to be at the end of Rule 14, and in reviewing just the sequential nature of this rule, it felt like this language made more sense to include here and not after we start going through the tabulation process. There's no substantive change.
Any discussion around C? D? Steph?
Just Steph Complainway in New Jersey, just another his, her, just switching to there in line 77. Well,
which?
Sorry, D, the first line of D, presidential candidate or his, her, should switch to there just to be consistent.
Okay. Grammatical change. Anything else? E? E has a lot of parts to it. Okay. F? Any discussion on F? G? Carol? I anticipated H with the straw polls, okay. So we'll go on to H.
Okay, when we talked about this before, there was a little bit of confusion, and I believe, I'm pretty sure that H was put in here to prevent state parties from holding straw polls, and because the campaigns despise straw polls. A couple of maybe clarifications. When we say the non-binding advisory presidential preference portion of primaries, should we say of state primaries or of state and local? Isn't that what we're talking about? That you tack a straw poll onto your regular primary? Is that what this is? What is the non-binding advisory portion of a primary? In the first,
Historian Rick doesn't have
line 47 and 48, I don't know what an advisory portion of a primary is.
David, did you have, were you
And
trying-
should we clarify just by putting in this whole section, we don't like straw polls, or something to make it clear that we are talking about straw polls and not ranked choice voting?
Yeah, okay, well, ranked choice voting, let's not, please. So David, did you want to?
Yeah, so
Frank.
David McDonald, Washington, two things. After I answered the question and give my comment, I'm going to move to table this particular section for a discussion when people have had time to understand it to the next session. But I do want to get an answer to your question. I have always interpreted it, I was not here when it was put in, but understood it to mean we do not want straw polls or advisory ballots or anything that impeaches the result that we have. So we do not want a circumstance where we have a 15% threshold and the campaigns issue a press release that candidate A won a narrowly contested contest in Iowa and has the momentum going on to the next state. And then the Iowa newspapers say, yeah, that's just the party rules, but actually the citizens of Iowa strongly prefer candidate B because, whatever. And so it more generally applies than I think you're speaking about. And there is a risk in connection with a state that is using ranked choice voting and continues to count, that the campaigns issue a press release that says so-and-so won the delegates, and then at the same time, the state is indicating that the public actually prefers something different. I've seen a variant of this in Washington in connection with Sanders and Clinton, where we were still a precinct caucus state. Sanders overwhelmingly won the precinct caucuses and the delegates. He won 70%. It wasn't clear to me that night that Clinton was going to get any delegates. But then a week later, they had a presidential preference primary that the party would not recognize, and Clinton won overwhelmingly 55. And so you get into that dynamic. There's not necessarily a good answer to this, and we did raise it with Maine that last time. I think from our point of view, they needed to stop counting at the first round. It wasn't that they could keep counting it and just tell us to use what we wanted. They needed to stop counting. But it's way too late in the day and people rushing for planes, I think, for us to try to make a decision on how to address this issue. And therefore, I would move to table it to this portion of 14. I'm not moving to table 14. In general,
Just maybe
14H.
clarify some definitions in this. I don't know, I get why we don't want to have straw polls, but in South Carolina, the Republicans have straw polls all the time. Their county parties will have a barbecue and straw poll, and the presidential candidates all buy lots of tickets and come so they can, so people will vote in their straw poll. Well, that's what I thought we were trying to do. And our county parties will sometimes say, oh, we're going to have a straw poll and we're going to charge everybody $15, and we have to go in and say, stop, you can't do that. So, but I do think some clearer language.
So are you seconding David's motion to table? Okay, all in favor of tabling 14H? Those opposed? I think the ayes have it. So 14H will be tabled. Well, this concludes our meeting, so maybe, yes. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. All in favor, say aye. Those opposed? I'm sure nobody will. And thank you all again. I know this has been a long 3 days, but you have been spectacular, and thank you very much for everything. Okay.